Deep in the depths of the universe, on a planet where civilization hadn't even begun, a research institute sat like a lonely giant in the middle of a barren desert. I was the only soul there. I sat at my desk, my black hair falling over my shoulders as I finished reviewing the day's biological growth data. It was time to rest. I reached for my audio device, hoping to find a traditional opera station to wind down, but a news broadcast caught my ear. The reporter was talking about the Aeon of Life. It was the first time this entity had appeared in public records. Apparently, envoys from the Interastral Peace Corporation were already making contact with related civilizations. I froze. My hand stayed on the dial as my emerald eyes flickered with a light I hadn't felt in a long time. My usually cold emotions stirred. The broadcast continued, describing how these civilizations viewed the Aeon of Life as a creator, a father who was both loving and strict. He protected them while they crawled, gave them freedom when they stood, and offered salvation when they faced destruction. Meanwhile, at Herta Space Station, I was sitting on a sofa in the lounge listening to that same broadcast. My name is Bai Yin. As I heard those praises, my brow furrowed deeper and deeper. I had hidden myself all the way out here, yet I still couldn't escape the constant worship from those children of mine. I honestly wanted to find the person being interviewed and cover their mouth. I wished they'd stop exaggerating. I was just a normal Aeon of Life. At my core, I wasn't that different from any other living being in the universe. I was just one of the many. I couldn't even remember how long it had been since I transmigrated into this world. Back then, I was just a guy playing Honkai, Star Rail version 1.6. An accident happened, and I woke up here. After countless ages, I touched the very concept of life and became an Aeon. I created civilizations, but eventually, I turned my gaze toward other beings. I was curious about everyone. The Swarm, the Intelligentsia Guild, even the frozen girls and the drifting ice. Everything was life, yet every life was unique. I loved recording those differences. I once traded a favor with Lon, the hunt, promising to help find Yaoshi, the abundance. In exchange, I got to observe Lan's biological composition. Then, I turned around and helped Yaoshi hide from Lon, just so I could study Yaoshi's life structure too. To be fair, Yaoshi was selfless and gave me the data for free. But once my curiosity about other Aeons was satisfied, I moved on. I came to Herta Space Station disguised as a regular researcher. I wanted to be near sentient curios and wait for a certain galactic batter to be born. Lately, a new urge had taken hold of me. I wanted to study the life structure of an Aeon again, but this time, I chose a different target, myself. The problem was, observing my own essence would ruin the integrity of the data. I needed a partner. They had to be a genius in life sciences and have the guts to experiment on a god. I searched my memories and found the perfect candidate. Wanmei. Our views on life didn't exactly align, which was why I hadn't granted her my path's power yet. But life isn't static. It can be molded. I figured if I trained her properly, we could have a deep collaboration. Maybe I'd even make her my emanator. If she performed well, I wouldn't mind giving her a reward, like the right to do whatever she wanted with my physical body. I locked onto her biological coordinates. It was time to walk into her room and kick down the doors to her heart. Back at the research institute, Wanmei wasn't sleeping. She was sitting at her desk in her pajamas, her damp black hair piled up after a bath. A single drop of water traced a path down her pale skin from her thigh ring. Instead of her usual snacks, she was poring over data about the Aeon of Life. She wanted to meet him. Suddenly, a sharp knock echoed through the room. Wanmei stiffened. There were no intelligent life forms on this planet. She stood up and walked to the door, her face calm, but her mind annoyed. She clicked the door open. The hallway was dim and completely empty. Then, she felt a warm touch on her neck. 2 fingers slid upward, hooking under her chin to force her head back. Opening your senses through touch lets the details of life flood the mind, I whispered from behind her. Even though I can see your entire composition with a single glance, I still wanted a little bit of revenge. Wanmei tried to move, but her nerves wouldn't take orders from her brain. I let go of her chin and walked past her. Manipulating life at will is just one of my powers, I said, pulling out her chair and sitting down. It's actually the one I like least. Too much interference ruins the beauty of life. I started scrolling through her recent experiment logs on the screen. Worried about your situation? Don't be. You still have value. Though, I see you've had quite a few failures lately. I looked back at her. You should be happy. You can ask me anything. These studies of yours are child's play to me. Ruan Mei remained silent, unable to speak. But if you want a reward, you have to pay a price, I continued. I'm here for a collaboration. A very physical collaboration. I released my control over her. I sat sideways at the desk and finally looked her in the eye. Ruan Mei turned around, her gaze meeting mine before she began to scan me. My hair was a bit messy, and my eyes looked like a deep, swirling galaxy. I wasn't the most handsome man in the universe, but I had a strange, approachable aura. Despite my blunt words, I felt familiar to her. And through that brief touch, she had sensed something incredible about the very nature of my life. I didn't bother hiding my identity any longer. It was time she knew. Ruan Mei stared at me, her eyes searching for a truth she couldn't yet grasp. I could tell she had never encountered a life form like mine. I didn't look like a monster or a god. I just looked like me. Let me introduce myself, I said, my voice calm. My name is Bai Yin. I am the Aeon of Life. I explained that I had been living on the Herta space station lately. To avoid the chaos, I pretended to be my own emanator. It was the only way to observe the curios and life forms here in peace. Only Herta and Asta knew the truth. To everyone else, I was just a traveling scholar. The truth was, I hated hiding. But the civilizations I had created were far too fanatical. Every time I visited them, it was like a superstar trying to escape a mob of obsessed fans. I had to wear disguises just to walk down the street. Now that those little kids were starting to interact with the Interastral Peace Corporation, I had to be even more careful. I was a god, yet I was living like a celebrity in hiding. Ruan Mei pursed her lips. She admitted she had never been close to an Aeon and didn't understand our biological composition. But that didn't mean she believed me. Believe it or not, it's up to you, I said. I don't force people. I stood up and reached for my head. I plucked a single strand of hair and laid it gently on her desk. It looked ordinary, but to a genius like her, it was a map of the divine. Consider this a greeting gift, I told her as I walked toward the door. I'm heading back to the station. If you want to collaborate, talk to Asta or Herta. Though, you might not always find me. I vanished into the hallway. Ruan Mei didn't follow. She stood by her desk, staring at that single strand of hair. She looked down at her own reflection, her gaze lingering on the curves of her body beneath her silk pajamas. She whispered to herself, wondering exactly what I meant by a physical collaboration. Back at the Herta space station, I sat in the lounge and brewed a cup of coffee. I didn't need to show off my power to prove who I was. The gap between an Aeon and a mortal is a canyon. When I touched her earlier, the details of my existence had already flooded her senses. Between geniuses, words are often unnecessary. She would understand eventually. She would probably check my files with Herta first, though. The door to the lounge swung open. A small, brown-haired puppet with purple eyes marched in. It was Herta. What did you do? She asked, her voice sharp. Ruan Mei is suddenly asking me for your activity logs. I offered her a deal. I replied, taking a sip of coffee. A physical exchange. We both get what we want. Two researchers nearby nearly choked on their drinks. If I had said it alone, they would have laughed. But because Herta was the one asking, they looked at me like I was a legend. I told Herta to give her the data. After all, a good partnership requires a little bit of trust. Herta rolled her eyes and left. She didn't want to play matchmaker for us. I finished my coffee and headed toward the containment zone. I wanted to check on the living curios. I knew Ruan Mei's reply wouldn't take long. Besides, I felt a shift in the station's energy. A few familiar life signals had just arrived. Himiko and her crew were back. The Antimatter Legion hadn't arrived yet. The Galactic Batter hadn't been born either. But the time was coming. Himiko and the Express crew usually stopped by to restock their supplies. I thought about the Trailblazer. That vessel wasn't a natural birth. It was a masterpiece created by Kafka. She would eventually wipe the memories of that artificial human and leave them here. I could have created a vessel myself. I've made countless bodies that could hold the stars, but I was curious about Kafka's work. It was like a teacher looking at a student's homework. I wanted to see her solution to the problem of containing a star. I decided that when the time came for her to plant the seed, I would step in. I wouldn't touch the memories, but I'd perfect the body. People called Kafka the mother of the trailblazer. I figured I might as well play the role of the father. As I walked through the halls, I heard staff whispering. News of a new Aeon was spreading across the galaxy, thanks to the IPC broadcasts. They wondered if I could control every living thing in the universe. I didn't care about the rumors. My path was simple. I deconstructed life. I observed the physical and read the conceptual. Even though I understood the cold mechanics of biology, I truly loved living things. I wanted to be near them, talk to them, and watch them grow. By reading their lives, I was writing my own. Meanwhile, on the Astral Express, a pink-haired girl tripped over her own feet. March 7th scrambled up from the floor, rubbing her backside. Pomp, the conductor, scolded her for being so restless during the jump. I was just trying to see if I could stay balanced this time. March huffed. Himiko stood up from her seat, her red hair flowing elegantly. All right, little March. We've arrived. She mentioned that Dan Hung was staying behind to organize the archives, and Welt was keeping Pomp company. You're going to find Bai Yen, aren't you? Himiko asked. Yeah. March 7th beamed, running toward the door. He promised to bring me specialties from his travels. I've got to see what he got. Himiko watched her go, a flicker of worry in her eyes. She trusted my character, but she knew how dangerous I could be. Not because I was cruel, but because I was too charming. I had a natural affinity that was almost impossible to resist. Even Himiko and Welt felt it. Just a few words from me, and people felt like they had known me for a lifetime. She was afraid that if I ever decided to sell March 7th, the poor girl would probably help me count the money. It's one thing to have a good first impression, but it's another thing entirely when almost everyone you meet feels like they've known you forever. That's the terrifying reality of my existence. I didn't use mental suggestions or cheap tricks. Everything was just natural. The universe is massive, but true friends are rare. March 7th and Himiko stepped off the Astral Express onto the platform of Herta Space Station. Himiko had to head off to handle the paperwork for resupplying the train, so they split up almost immediately. The first thing March did was pull out her phone and shoot me a text. Bai Yen, which sector are you in? We're at the station. I replied quickly. Storage zone. Don't bother coming all the way here. You know where my room is, right? Just meet me there. On the surface, I was a researcher like everyone else, but I had one major perk, my own office. I'd set up a folding bed inside, turning it into a combined workspace and bedroom. March used to joke that I'd get along great with Dan Hung. One slept on the floor of the archives, and the other lived on a folding bed in an office. Ironically, despite Dan Hung being a man of few words, he and I once talked for half a day straight. I told him stories about the stars he'd never heard of, helping him fill the gaps in the Express's databank. My knowledge of alien species was incredibly detailed, sometimes too detailed. Dan Hung couldn't even verify half of it, so he just kept my notes separate from the official records for a while. Himiko once said that I didn't seem like a scholar. To her, I was more like a traveler who had seen every corner of the galaxy. March had even invited me to join the Express crew, but I told her it wasn't the right time yet. After I finished recording data on a few curios, I headed back to my office. My phone buzzed again. It was Silver Wolf, the genius hacker from the Stellaron Hunters. We had met by chance and now spent our downtime gaming together. New co-op event just dropped. You in? She asked. Then another message popped up. Oh, by the way, did you know I just pulled the top-tier reward on my first try? I stared at the screen, my brow twitching. I wanted to play with her, but I had just hit the hard pity on my own pulls and got nothing. I felt like flying across the galaxy just to punch her. But I reminded myself that I played games to connect with life forms, not to commit assault. No time. Playing by myself. I replied. No way, she texted back. Are you actually salty? Fine. I'll go play with the kid. The kid, she mentioned, was a digital life form I created. Silver Wolf had helped me with the technical coding, so he was basically our joint creation. I didn't have much time for him, so I usually just sent him credits to spend on in-game microtransactions and let him roam the web. Silver Wolf ended up doing most of the parenting, and honestly, they seemed to have a blast together. Suddenly, my doorbell rang. Come in, I said. The door slid open, and March 7th bounced in with a wide grin. I'm not interrupting your research, am I? Not at all. Have a seat. I stood up and pulled a folded evening gown from my cabinet. It was a stunning blend of pink and white, with intricate patterns that seemed to glow. This is the specialty I told you about. It's a banquet dress woven by elven tailors using unique materials. March's eyes practically turned into sparkling stars. She reached for it, but I held it back with a smile. Don't get too excited. I don't have a changing room in here, and I don't think you want me watching you change. March immediately crossed her arms over her chest, blushing. I'll wait until I get back to the train. For a split second, a weird thought had crossed her mind. She actually wondered if she should just ask me to turn around while she tried it on. She shook the thought away, embarrassed. Why was she even thinking that? In truth, if I really wanted to see through her clothes, I didn't need her to change. I could just switch my visual perception. The material is special, I explained. It adjusts itself to the wearer's body. You don't have to worry about the fit. That's amazing. March laughed, feeling a bit shy. This is so expensive. I don't even know how to thank you. Don't be so formal. If I ever need a favor in the future, just don't say no. I was being polite, but there was more to it. Long ago, the Aeon of Trailblaze, Akivali, had asked me for a favor. He told me that if he ever disappeared, he hoped I'd look after the nameless. That was the price for letting me observe life structures, but it was also a request from a friend. I genuinely liked the Express crew. I enjoyed watching them, learning about their pasts, and seeing their futures unfold. March took my words to heart. Next time you need something, just ask. I'll definitely help. In her eyes, I was just a talented scholar. She wasn't even sure if I could fight, so she figured I'd eventually need the crew's protection. I could see exactly what she was thinking. You really want to try it on, don't you? I teased. Go ahead. The train isn't leaving yet. We have time. I reached back into the cabinet and pulled out a few more items. Also take these. Coffee beans for Himiko, a book and notebook for Dan Hong, a mecha model for Welt, and some donuts for Pom Pom. March blinked in surprise. How do you know exactly what everyone likes? I pay attention. I picked up the jar of coffee beans. These are called Constant Taste. No matter how you brew them, they never taste bad. It's a miracle bean. I smirked. Thank me later. This should stop Himiko from poisoning you all with her special coffee for a while. Don't tell her the secret of the beans, I added. I'm not stupid. I won't say a word, March promised. She remembered how traumatized I looked the last time Himiko served me that black sludge she calls coffee. As March left with the gifts, I turned my attention toward another gift I had sent out, the one for Ruanmei. In Ruanmei's laboratory, a single strand of black hair floated inside a spherical glass vessel. It looked like an ordinary human hair, but Ruanmei was focused intensely on her console. The screen showed the progress of her analysis. 0.001%. The number hadn't budged since she started. It was as if the remaining 99.999% belonged to a realm of physics that shouldn't exist. Ruanmei didn't look frustrated, though. Instead, a faint, cold smile appeared on her face. She was determined to unseal this mystery. She set the program to run for the next few system hours and headed back to her lounge. She needed to carefully reread the file Herta had sent her about the man that hair belonged to. Me. I pulled out some fresh pastries I had recently bought. Ever since that uninvited guest showed up, I had been busy. I hadn't even found the time to change out of my pajamas, let alone eat. I needed to recharge. I sat at my desk, multitasking between eating and scanning the computer screen. Herta had sent over a file. I didn't need to guess who compiled it. It was definitely Asta, the acting station master. I took a bite of the sweet dessert and watched the windows bloom across the monitor. Photos, names, arrival times, public aliases, true identities, and activity logs. Everything was there. It was perfectly organized, without a single trace of clutter. I scanned the data, mentally summarizing the key points. My first visit to the space station was a year ago. On the surface, I was a scholar in the field of life sciences. To gain access to certain curios, I had revealed my identity to Herta as an emanator of life. I had even proposed a collaboration. However, the specific details of that deal were covered by black squares in the file. Either Herta didn't want anyone to know, or even Asta didn't have the clearance to see them. I wondered what I had done to make Herta recognize my status so quickly. An emanator of life. I remembered clearly what I told Ruan-mei, that I was just pretending to be my own emanator. Was that a lie? I didn't even know anymore. I knew Ruan-mei didn't trust me much yet. She was still struggling to analyze the physical composition of that hair I gave her. It wasn't a lack of confidence on her part. It was just a rational analysis of the facts. Collaboration. Maybe it was time to discuss the details. Even if I wasn't the Aeon of life, the information I held made me worth the risk. Physical collaboration. That was a suggestive phrase. Anyone would be curious about it. Ruan-mei was currently weighing whether an unknown life form was worth the gamble. She might not trust my words, but she trusted Herta's judgment. If Herta believed in me, then even if I wasn't a god, I was at least an emanator. I reached up and touched my neck. I traced the spot where I had touched Ruan-mei earlier. That strange sensation from our first contact was still there. My fingers slid from my neck up to my chin. I found myself reminiscing. If we touched again, would I gain more information? Meanwhile, back in my office at the Herta space station, a guest arrived. Or rather, the real owner of the station had come to visit her guest. A Herta puppet walked in and promptly locked the door behind her. I spun my swivel chair around to face her. Madam Herta, you should really think about my reputation, I said with a smirk. I don't want to be labeled a puppet enthusiast or a lolicon. Herta's expression remained flat. I can leave right now. I'll just add the label premature to your file on the way out. I laughed. All right, no more jokes. What do you need? As an emanator, how much do you know about the Aeon of life? She asked. I raised an eyebrow. I thought Ruan-mei would have the answers by now, though she's getting close. I sighed and looked at her. Let me ask you this. As an emanator of erudition, do you know everything about Noose? Anyone else would have told me not to answer a question with a question. But Herta was smart. She caught my drift immediately. You mean your knowledge of your god is about the same as mine is of Noose? I smiled. You really are the smartest member of the Genius Society. Skip the flattery and the sarcasm. Herta snapped, getting straight to the point. I want you to provide data on the Aeon of life. What do you want? Credits? Something else? I knew exactly what she wanted the data for. She wanted to add the Aeon of life to the simulated universe. I kept my smile steady. Are you really trying to test the loyalty of a devoted emanator with just credits? Herta rolled her eyes. That's why I asked what you wanted. Credits aren't the only option. I thought you were smarter than that. No. I just wanted to say that classic line, I admitted. I had known this day would come since I first arrived as an emanator. Herta hadn't pushed before because we agreed to wait until the Aeon of life officially entered the public eye. That day was here. But I wasn't going to give her everything. I'd only give her what she could eventually find out on her own. So, my loyal emanator, what is it you want? Herta asked again. I answered instantly, half joking. I want you. Fine. Herta agreed without hesitation. This puppet is yours. I won't log into this one ever again. Madam Herta, you're playing dumb, I said. I'm not talking about the puppet. You know exactly what I mean. Herta understood perfectly. If you want to refuse, just say it. Don't beat around the bush. To her, my request was just a joke to turn her down. She hadn't expected much from me anyway. She was just trying her luck. She had heard from the IPC that civilizations following the Aeon of life were fanatically loyal. Not just the Pathstriders, but even the ordinary believers. As an emanator, my loyalty was assumed to be absolute. I'm leaving, Herta said, turning her puppet toward the door. Wait, I called out. Did I say no? The puppet didn't turn back. I can shop around. Information on your Aeon doesn't have to come from you. And I'm not selling myself. I don't want to buy you. I just want to read your life, I said. The puppet stopped. She turned back, her purple eyes locking onto mine. How many pages do you want to read? I gave her a meaningful smile. Every single page. A moment later, Herta walked out of my office carrying a USB drive. In exchange, she had left me a file. It was a document that had never been made public. It contained personal data on member number 83 of the Genius Society, Herta herself. Clearly, she hadn't agreed to let me read every page. That would be like standing naked before me. She didn't want anyone in the world to know her better than she knew herself. But I wasn't in a hurry. As long as she was interested in Ian's, there would be plenty of chances for deep communication. The life of a genius was something to be savored slowly. Eventually, I would know her better than she knew herself, just like everyone else I had encountered. As she left, Herta tossed one last comment over her shoulder. By the way, May just sent word. She's planning to visit the station soon. She didn't ask me or asked to contact you. She's coming for you directly. Herta's warning about May visiting the station didn't surprise me. Yin knew exactly what May was doing. She was hesitating. She wasn't the type to believe I was an Aeon just because of a few rumors. But based on the intel Herta had leaked to her, she likely suspected I was, at the very least, an emanator of life. She was currently weighing the risks against the rewards of making contact. This advance notice of her visit was a hook. She wanted to keep me here, to make sure I didn't vanish before she could study me. After all, I had told her before that she could reach me through Asta or Herta, but I'd also hinted that I might be hard to find. The fish was starting to bite. I wasn't in a rush. I had plenty of patience. For someone like me, who had watched life evolve from single cells to tribes and eventually into interstellar civilizations, the concept of time had become a blur. 36 system hours passed in the blink of an eye. The Astral Express was still docked at the Herta space station platform. I was relaxing on the sofa in the parlor car when March 7th stepped in front of me. She was fiddling with her small, sky-blue camera, determined to take my picture. Himiko was at the table nearby, brewing coffee. Walt was helping Pom-Pom prepare breakfast for everyone. Dan-hung walked in from the next carriage, gave a simple nod, and mentioned that things had been interesting lately. Click, click. The shutter snapped several times. The pink-haired girl sat down next to me with a bright smile, showing off the trophies she had captured with her lens. I looked at the photos and nodded in approval. I have to admit, the male model is looking pretty good, I teased. Don't be so full of yourself. March 7th shot back. It's clearly my superior photography skills at work. I let out a fake, dramatic sigh. Is it really that hard to just give me a compliment? Fine, fine, she giggled. You look good. Happy now. After she finished teasing me, she hung the camera back on her hip and changed the subject. Hey, Yin, aren't you a researcher in life sciences? There's been a lot of talk lately about a new aeon of life appearing. Do you feel anything special? What kind of feeling? I asked. You know, like being glanced at by an aeon? The feeling of becoming a pathstrider. I shook my head slightly and said something that left her looking completely bewildered. I don't like looking in mirrors. March 7th stared at me, her face a giant question mark. What does that even mean? Dan Hung, who usually kept to himself while organizing his archives, looked up. He had been listening to us the whole time. He means he is that aeon, Dan Hung explained calmly. Huh. March 7th immediately reached out and pressed her palm against my forehead. Your head isn't hot. You don't have a fever. Himiko, still busy with the coffee, gave us a kind warning. It's probably best not to joke about that aeon. I've heard his followers are incredibly loyal. You might invite trouble. It's not that serious, I explained. They're loyal, sure, but they aren't fanatics. How would you know? March 7th asked, her suspicion returning. Himiko walked over carrying 2 cups of coffee, cutting off the conversation. All right, let's end this topic here. Try some of this. If you two keep talking, you really might attract the attention of those believers, and that would be a headache. I took a cup from Himiko and took a sip. The taste was rich and slightly bitter. There were still some coffee grounds affecting the texture, but it was much better than her previous attempts. These beans were high quality. No matter how you brewed them, they wouldn't taste bad. A short while later, breakfast was ready. I finished the meal with the crew before preparing to head back to my office. Before I left, I made sure to give them one last instruction. I really am an aeon, I said seriously. Don't mention this to anyone outside. I'm afraid those fanatical little followers of mine might come chasing after me. I trust you guys. I walked off the train before they could respond. An aeon? What was he talking about? Pom-Pom asked, looking confused. Himiko chuckled. He was just joking with March. He's pretending to be a believer who's afraid of his own kind. March, remember not to let it slip. Don't worry, March said, patting her chest. My lips are sealed. Walt didn't join the banter. He opened his phone and pulled up the latest news regarding the civilizations following the aeon of life. One photo caught his eye, a massive mecha standing tall on a distant planet. To a casual observer, mecha models all look similar. But to an enthusiast like Welt, the details were unmistakable. That giant machine was a near-perfect match for the model Bai Yin had gifted him. March, Welt said, his voice low. Bai Yin told you those gifts were local specialties from his home, right? March 7th blinked her big eyes. Yeah. What? Walt looked back at the news photo. If Bai Yin came from a civilization that worshipped the aeon of life, he wouldn't dare impersonate their god. The followers were too loyal for that kind of blasphemy. That ruled out him being an ordinary citizen. Furthermore, those civilizations had only just made contact with the wider galaxy, yet Bai Yin had been at the space station for a long time. If Bai Yin wasn't a heretic, then Walt turned off his phone. Nothing. Just remember what he said. Don't betray his trust. A few days passed in a flash. The Astral Express had already departed the station to continue its journey of trailblaze. Before they left, I had asked Himiko about their route. They were heading toward a planet called Jarilo 6. By my calculations, the next time they returned to the station would be the day the Stellaron Hunters script reached its climax. If I were still the old Bai Yin, I would be excited for the main story to begin. But now, I just wanted to see how this rising star would bloom. I wondered how my interference would warp the script the Stellaron Hunters had written. I was sitting in my office, scrolling through the data Herta had left me, when I felt a familiar life signature approaching. Every life form had a unique coordinate. March 7th's was innocent and bright. Himiko's was mature and steady. The one I felt now was elegant on the surface, but hidden beneath that grace was a sharp, cold obsession. Ruan Mei had arrived. I stayed in my seat. Ding! The doorbell rang. Come in, I said, turning my chair around. The door slid open. A woman with black hair stepped inside, radiating an aura of intellectual elegance. She wore a teal, Cheongsam-style dress that swayed gently with her stride. Her deep green eyes met mine. Her face was calm, beautiful, and completely unreadable. The door clicked shut behind her. I spoke first. Have you made up your mind? Since we are going to cooperate, shouldn't we discuss the details first? Ruan Mei asked. Her voice was soft and gentle. You mentioned a physical cooperation. I don't quite understand why you use such ambiguous phrasing, but I would like to learn more. I stood up and walked toward her. Ruan Mei didn't flinch. She simply watched me, waiting for an answer. I reached out and took her left wrist, lifting her hand and placing it against my neck. My pulse was steady. The rhythm of my life force pulsed against her gloved fingers. A flicker of surprise crossed her eyes. Are you interested in this body? I asked. I lowered Ruan Mei's hand. I could see the obsession in her eyes. She was a woman who lived for the essence of life, someone who could spend years in isolation just to complete a single study. As the aeon of life, I knew I was the ultimate temptation for her. My body held the answers to the origin of existence and the secrets of the gods. Ruan Mei regained her composure. She wasn't the type to lose her cool, and she clearly didn't believe I was an aeon yet. But that touch, that vibrant, impossible pulse of life, had shaken her logic. I took a half step back, cutting off the contact. The free trial was over. If you want to keep exploring this body, we need to discuss our partnership, I said. The flicker of doubt vanished from her face, replaced by her usual calm. I still find it hard to trust your identity as an aeon, she admitted. But I am interested in this cooperation. What do you want from me? If this partnership is just about touching, I'm afraid I can't accept. Of course not, I replied, backing away. Let's look at something first. I snapped my fingers. The high-tech office dissolved. The walls faded into endless rows of towering bookshelves that stretched into a ceiling lost in the clouds. A thick white mist swallowed the horizon. This is my library, I explained, playing the role of the guide. It records the physiological and social structures of countless life forms. Information on the eons of hunt and abundance is in here, too. I walked along the shelves. I've lost track of when I started. Creating, observing, deconstructing. I admire the beauty of life, the souls, the melodies, the mundane, and the magnificent. But I realize that all life, even the eons, is flawed. I wanted to see if a perfect life form could exist. Ruan Mei had been quiet, taking it all in. Now she spoke up. Do you think perfection actually exists? I smiled. It doesn't. That's why creating it has value. On this path, We will face other eons and deconstruct their existence. We will read the lives of wanderers. Sometimes our journey will be more exciting than the trailblaze. Other times, it will be emptier than the mind of the propagation. I leaned in closer. As we work together, the rewards will grow. I can correct your experimental errors, explain the essence of life, and show you the biological makeup of a god. I'll even give you the right to examine the aeon of life however you wish. The price? She asked. You leave your lab. You become my assistant. This journey will change you, Ruanmei. So, are you coming with me? Ruanmei looked at me, a rare, faint smile touching her lips. My speech had worked. She was stirred. However, her rationality was a fortress. She needed to know exactly what she was getting into. She felt a dangerous pull toward me, a physical urge to touch and study me that she could barely resist. She had decided long ago that researching eons was worth any price. She reached up, tucking a stray hair behind her ear with a gloved hand, her dark green eyes locked onto mine. May I verify some of this first? You have permission to read the first level, I said. I snapped my fingers again. A simple wooden door appeared beside her. I turned to leave through it, throwing a parting remark over my shoulder. Don't make me wait too long, my dear assistant, or I'll have to kick you out of here myself. Watch your step. I vanished, leaving the door behind as her exit. Ruanmei pulled a book from the shelf, but before she could open it, a girl's voice chirped from behind her. Darn it, he's so fast. I thought he came back to see me. Ruanmei turned. A young girl, barely 4 feet tall with silver-gray twin tails, stood there chewing bubble gum. Who are you? The girl asked, looking Ruanmei up and down. Why are you here? I am Ruanmei. Mr. Baiyin invited me. I have permission to be here. Ruanmei paused, studying the child. And who are you? You called him father? I'm a digital life form created by father, the girl said proudly. The number 1. Wait. No, the number 2 genius hacker in the universe. Call me Enyu. Enyu circled Ruanmei like a shark. Ruanmei remained expressionless. A digital life form? Is this a data space then? Ugh, too much work to explain. I'm going back to my games, Enyu grumbled. She turned and began to fade into the mist between the shelves. I heard her muttering to herself as she left. Is she supposed to be my new stepmother? No way. Father doesn't have worldly desires, but he's the aeon of life, and propagation is technically creating life. Ruanmei watched her go, her mind racing. The girl's personality was nothing like mine. Was she a deliberate creation or a natural development? Was this meeting a coincidence, or had I planned it to confuse her? She opened the book in her hands. It detailed the physiology of an elf, their entire life cycle, how their body changed with their experiences, and how society shaped their form. I wasn't just interested in the seeds of life. I was interested in the flowers they became. Ruanmei put the book back and reached for a species she knew better. She was hooked. My curiosity was piqued. Between the research data and our 2 recent encounters, I had Ruanmei exactly where I wanted her. We shared the same goal, but she needed time. I could tell she wanted a few system hours to calculate the truth behind the information I'd given her. She needed to know if the pie in the sky I promised was actually attainable. I sat back in my office, casually flipping through the personal files Herta had given me. I hadn't seen Enyu in the library earlier. The girl was probably off playing games with Silver Wolf again. I really needed to check on them soon. Enyu's spending habits were getting out of control lately. I suspected she and Silver Wolf were teaming up to fleece my accounts, but honestly, she earned every credit. She was the one managing my digital footprint, scrubbing every trace of my true identity from the web. Thanks to her, I could live in peace without a horde of fanatical cultists tracking me down. Ding dong, the doorbell rang. I didn't sense a living presence outside, just a faint connection stretching across the stars. It wasn't a biological being, it was a puppet. Herta's puppet. Come in, I said. The door slid open. The tiny, jointed doll walked in, her eyes fixed in a dead stare that screamed annoyance. I decided to strike first with a joke. I didn't know Lady Herta was so polite, I teased. You have the authority to walk right in, yet you actually rang the bell. The possibility is low, but I didn't want to walk in on you and Ruanmei doing something unsightly, Herta replied flatly. She didn't even try to defend her lack of manners. She looked around the room, her wooden head tilting. Where did you hide her? She's on the station, but I can't reach her. It's like she's in a dead zone. I have business with her. Let her out. She's not here, I said simply. I'll pass on the message when she gets back. Fine. Herta didn't seem to care much about Ruan Mei's well-being. She was already looking for a backup plan. If you lose her, you'd better find me another partner for the simulated universe. The puppet's joints creaked as she turned to leave. At the door, she paused. By the way, bring Ruan Mei to my office later. The data you provided on the Aeon of Abundance, it has some similarities to the files the IPC gave me. I watched the door close. Herta was sharp. I went back to her personal files, muttering to myself. I wondered if she realized there was someone in this world who understood the Eons even better than she did. 2 system hours passed quickly. I had just finished reading the last page when a primitive, elegant door manifested in the center of my office. Ruan Mei stepped out, her black hair swaying. Have you decided? She asked, her lips curving slightly. I still can't be certain you are an Aeon. I can't even confirm how much of my vision you can actually fulfill. She paused, letting the silence hang. But, she continued, a rare smile touching her cold face. A smile tinged with a hint of obsession and madness. I am willing to take the risk. I smiled back. She was finally on board. In my memories of her story, Ruan Mei was a woman whose emotions were fading, yet the mere mention of an Aeon was enough to make her heart skip a beat. I stood up. Let's go. Herta is waiting for us in her office. It's probably about the simulated universe. I walked over to her and held out my hand. A simple celebration for our partnership. Want to walk there holding hands? Consider it a reward. Ruan Mei reached out instinctively, then flinched, pulling her hand back. To her, the information I leaked was like a single drop of water, but touching me felt like staring into the vast, terrifying depths of the entire ocean. The secrets of life were right there, waiting for her, but she sensed the danger. She hesitated. She realized she shouldn't shrink back if she was truly prepared for the risk. She started to reach out again, but I had already pulled my hand away. If you don't want to, forget it, I said, walking toward the door. A flash of disappointment crossed her face, though she remained silent as she followed me. Our footsteps echoed through the quiet corridors until we reached the main hall where the researchers gathered. People stopped and stared. Ruan Mei was the 81st member of the Genius Society, a hermit who could grow a planet but rarely spoke to a soul. They only knew her through Herta. Seeing her in the flesh was like seeing a ghost. They saw me too. In their eyes, I was just a talented researcher, good enough for a private office, but nowhere near the league of the Genius Society. They assumed we had just bumped into each other by chance. I stopped suddenly and turned around. With a slight smirk, I held my hand out to her one more time. I'll give you one last chance. Do you want to hold hands? This time, Ruan Mei didn't hesitate. She placed her hand in mine. She didn't care about the shocked stares of the researchers. She was too focused on the overwhelming flood of biological information coming from my skin. She was trying to figure out how my body was formed, why the life force was so dense. Was I truly the Aeon of life? To get a better reading, she gripped my hand tighter, her fingers interlacing with mine. You're holding on a bit too tight, I whispered after a few steps. Ruan Mei used her free hand to brush a stray hair from her eyes. Her emerald gaze was calm, almost predatory. Is that not allowed? Greedy. I chuckled, gently letting go and continuing toward Herta's office. Ruan Mei looked at her palm for a moment before following. Behind us, the hallway was a disaster zone. One researcher dropped a stack of reports, watching them scatter across the floor. Another walked straight into a wall. A third researcher choked on his tea, coughing violently as he pointed at our retreating backs. What was that? He gasped, his face red. Did I just see that? His colleague could only stare. Don't ask me. I never thought I'd see the day. The hallway behind us was pure chaos. I could hear the researchers whispering frantically as we walked away. How did Bai Yin pull that off? One of them hissed. He never even mentioned he knew her. The female staff members were even worse, their gossip spreading like wildfire. They were analyzing every micro-movement. One wondered why I had let go of Ruan Mei's hand, guessing we had already hit a rough patch in our relationship. Another tried to argue that we weren't a couple yet, but she was quickly shut down. Interlocking fingers? That wasn't just a friendly gesture. One girl looked like her world had ended. "Does this mean Bai Yin and Lady Ruan-mei are getting married?" she wailed. Her colleague promptly smacked her over the head with a stack of manuscripts to shut her up. Asta was standing nearby, trying to keep a straight face. She was better prepared than the others. She was the one who had compiled my files for Ruan-mei, after all. To everyone else, I was just a low-level scholar who shouldn't even be in the same room as a member of the Genius Society. But Asta knew the truth. She knew I was an emanator of life. Still, even she was caught off guard by how fast things were moving. "Miss Asta," one technician called out, looking confused. "Is there something wrong with the space station's network?" Asta blinked. "What do you mean?" "Earlier, I overheard Bai Yin telling Ruan-mei they needed to engage in some physical cooperation. I tried to text my friends outside the station about it, but the message wouldn't send. And just now, I tried to upload a photo of them holding hands. It failed instantly. Far away in a hidden corner of the galaxy, the Stellaron hunters were hard at work. Silver Wolf sat on a sofa, her fingers flying across her phone screen. Next to her, a small girl with silver twin tails, who looked remarkably like her, sat in a flickering holographic form. "Dad is out there flirting with other women," the little girl, Enyu, grumbled while playing her game. "And here I am, covering his tracks so the internet doesn't find out." Kafka stood behind them, a playful smile dancing on her lips. "It does sound like a rather scandalous story. But Elio says the script has changed. We'll be meeting your father officially very soon." Silver Wolf didn't look up from her screen. "I wouldn't call that a formal meeting. I've been babysitting Enyu for him this whole time. When I see him, I'm definitely making him pay up." Back on the station, Ruan-mei and I stepped into Herta's office. I wanted to see which genius thought they knew more about the Aeon of Life than I did. Herta wasn't there in person, of course. One of her puppets flickered to life near the simulated universe system. "You're 2 system hours late," the puppet snapped. "And what was that nonsense you were just spouting?" I walked over to a large portrait of Herta hanging on the wall. I let out a long, dramatic sigh. I was just admiring this painting. It's so beautiful, almost as beautiful as the Aeon of Life himself. Herta rolled her puppet eyes. "If you were a devout believer, I'd take that as a compliment. But based on how you act, I highly doubt it." "How could you say that?" I asked, placing a hand over my heart. "No one in this world is more loyal to the Aeon of Life than me." Enough trash talk, Herta cut me off. She flicked her wrist, and a holographic screen floated in front of me. "This is the data the IPC provided on the Aeon of Life." Ruan-mei stood silently beside me. She was acting like a proper assistant now, though I could tell she was still mentally processing the biological data she'd stolen from my hand. Every now and then, her hand would drift toward mine, as if she had a physical urge to touch me again just to be sure of what she'd felt. I scanned the files. It was exactly what I expected, the IPC's stereotypical view of a god. "Stereotypes?" Herta asked, catching my expression. "They think the Aeon of Life has no secular desires," I said with a chuckle. "It's as ridiculous as people who think beautiful girls don't use the bathroom. No desire is ever truly separate from the world." Herta went quiet for a second. "So, does the Aeon of Life use the bathroom?" The question was so blunt, I almost choked. He could if he wanted to. "You're getting funnier, Lady Herta." "I learned it from you," she retorted. "The man who claims to be the most loyal follower, but has no problem trading the god's secrets for personal gain." "Your sharp tongue is as charming as ever," I teased. "I'd love to get a real taste of it sometime." Herta glared at me. "You'd have to find my real body first. Or, I could trade you another puppet. You can kiss that one as much as you want. I won't stop you. And if I do find you," I leaned in, "will you let me have my way?" "No chance." Normally, Herta would have ignored such a comment, confident that no one could ever track her down. But looking at me, she felt a flicker of genuine doubt. She sensed that I might actually be able to do it. "What if I could arrange a meeting between you and the Aeon of Life?" I asked softly. "A long, private conversation. Wouldn't that help your simulated universe?" Herta hesitated. That was the ultimate prize for a scientist like her. Her lips curled into a small smile. "Do it first. Then we'll talk. It's a deal. I'll find a way for you to meet him, in person." Ruan-mei, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke up. She had been analyzing the data on the screen. It seems the path of life contains a massive amount of propagation components. In scientist speak, she was basically saying my vitality was a bit too high for comfort. Herta ignored the subtext and pulled up another screen for Ruanmei. This data is undisputed. Check it against your own findings. I'll pick the parts we can integrate into the simulation. Ruanmei focused on the screen. She had been obsessed with the aeon of life long before I showed up, so most of the information was familiar. But then, she hit a line she had never seen before. She read it aloud in her soft, elegant voice. The aeon of life has no interest in ordinary humans and prefers non-human females. Slander, I shouted, nearly jumping out of my skin. That is absolute slander. Herta stared at me, stunned. She had never seen me lose my cool like that. She wondered if she had underestimated my respect for the aeon after all. Was I really that offended by a rumor? Or was I just terrified that the aeon's strange tastes would somehow reflect poorly on me, his loyal emanata? Herta and Ruanmei both stared at me. I had to explain myself before things got weird. Look, the aeon of life has no bias against any form of life, I said, trying to sound dignified. In his eyes, Madame Herta and a newborn insect are exactly the same. Both are just expressions of vitality. Herta's expression turned ice cold. She reached into thin air and pulled out a massive, terrifying hammer. Can I hit you now? She asked. I knew I hadn't truly crossed the line yet. If I had, she wouldn't have asked for permission. She would have just swung. Ruanmei didn't look up from her screen, but she chimed in. If you had reversed the comparison, Herta wouldn't be reacting like this. Herta put the hammer away, though the chill in her eyes remained. He's doing it on purpose. Don't tell me he just happened to use a bug as an example. I didn't bother arguing. I actually liked this atmosphere. It was lively. Ruanmei noticed another line of data that piqued her interest. The aeon of life often descends into the mortal world to observe and enlighten sentient beings, she read softly. Then, she looked at me. I gave her a shameless smile. Can I dispute that one too? Herta beat her to the punch. What exactly do you want to dispute? Forget it, I don't care. Say whatever you want. She wasn't going to play my games. Don't think that staying mysterious will make us more curious, Herta added. Save your rhetoric for the common folk. I wasn't planning on saying more anyway, I replied. I began marking up the data on the floating screen. I've added my explanations regarding those rumors the IPC spread about me. You can read them later. Believe them or not, it's up to you. I flicked the screen over to Herta. You know better than anyone whether to trust those corporate reporters or trust me. Ruanmei handed her screen back to Herta as well. The data seems consistent. We can try integrating it into the simulated universe, but our understanding of this aeon is still too shallow. For now, we should keep it in the database and not activate it. Agreed, Herta said. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing. I'm still waiting for a certain someone to fulfill his boast and let me meet the aeon in person. And I'm looking forward to analyzing what your tongue is made of, Madame Herta, I shot back politely. They were about to dive into deep academic talk about the simulation, and I wasn't in the mood to listen. I turned to leave. Don't keep my assistant for too long, I called out over my shoulder. Send her back soon. The office door slid shut behind me. Inside, I heard Herta's voice rise in confusion. Assistant? You agreed to be his assistant. Ruanmei didn't deny it. It is as you see, but that isn't what we should be discussing, is it? Fine, Herta grumbled. I don't have the energy to care about your business. Genius Society members didn't usually have much emotional depth between them, but they understood each other. Ruanmei was the type of person who would laugh if someone called her low profile. Yet here she was, humbling herself to be my assistant. I made it back to my own office and sank into my chair. It had been a while since I'd played games, so I hopped online with Silver Wolf and Silver Moon. Silver Moon says you've been getting cozy with some woman lately. Silver Wolf's voice crackled through the headset. Who is she? We aren't getting cozy, I replied. I just touched her neck, held her hand, and maybe locked fingers once or twice. Why do you care? The channel went silent for a few seconds. Silver Moon feels like you're looking for a stepmother, Silver Wolf said finally. She's not taking it well. You should be careful. Then, a clear, cute girl's voice joined the chat. I'm not taking it badly at all, Silver Moon chirped. Another silence followed. Mom, if you're the one feeling bad, just say it, Silver Moon added. Don't drag me into it. In the game, Silver Wolf's character suddenly turned and blasted Silver Moon's character with a massive damage shot. There was no friendly fire in this game, but she did it anyway. Someone's getting triggered, Silver Moon teased. I won't say who. Before Silver Wolf could snap back, Silver Moon continued. Actually, Anicap talked to me about it. A family of 3 plus a stepmother sounds great. A lot of games have 4-player co-op. It'll be way more convenient. If anyone else had been listening to this, they would have thought our family morals were circling the drain. Father, don't hold back, Silver Moon urged. There's a new RPG out with 16-player raids. I sighed. You need to spend less time with Kafka. You misunderstand, Father. I'm not telling you to find 12 more stepmothers. Then what do you mean? I mean you and Mom should just have 12 more kids. Silver Wolf's character immediately gunned down Silver Moon's freshly respawned avatar. You are definitely spending less time with Kafka, she growled. We played for about 2 hours. Silver Wolf eventually left to go on a mission with Kafka, and Silver Moon hit me up for some pocket money before continuing her solo grind. A chime rang at my door. Come in, I said. The door opened, and I met a pair of dark green eyes. Ruanmei walked in with graceful steps. The news of us holding hands hasn't left the space station, she noted. Was that your doing? I have a digital life form that intercepts all information regarding me, I explained. I had him add your name to the filter. You're concerned about my reputation? She tilted her head. I smiled. Who knows? Mostly, I just don't want to be found by those fanatic believers. They're a hassle. Ruanmei nodded. Our cooperation has begun. What is the next step? We wait. For what? I looked out at the stars, my voice flat and calm. We wait for a certain life to be born. We wait for the aeon of destruction, Nanook, to cast his gaze downward. When he does, I will follow that gaze back to him. I'm going to capture Nanook alive and put him on our lab table. My ability to sense life was like a universal radar, but Nanook was an aeon. He knew how to mask his signal. Since our last fight, he had vanished from my map. I wasn't just here to check on the Stellaron Hunter's progress. I was here to recover a lost lab sample. I wouldn't be as gentle with him as I was with the Ians of Hunt or Abundance. It'll be tricky, I admitted. He's wary of me now. If I wanted him dead, I'd have a 70% chance. To take him alive? Only 30. I paused, thinking it through. But even if I can't catch him, I can at least hack off an arm to bring back for research. Maybe I'll grab one of his Lord Ravagers while I'm at it. A rare, faint smile touched Ruanmei's face. The Hunt and the Abundance have chased each other for ages without a conclusion. If you truly manage to wound destruction so easily, I will have to apologize for my lack of faith. Just an apology? I asked. What else would you want? She replied. Herda's data said the Aeon of Life prefers non-human females. Do you need me to help you scout for some propagation partners? Slander. I barked. I told you it's absolute slander. I had only wanted to create some bold new life forms back then. I never expected the universe to misinterpret it so wildly. Besides, now that I was in a world full of diverse, intelligent species, my tastes were much more refined than that. If I didn't interact with fox girls, mechanical maidens, or galaxy elves, I'd be wasting this magnificent world. I tried to explain my logic to Ruanmei one more time. I looked her in the eye, my voice full of mock seriousness. You should know, I said. In my eyes, you are just as beautiful as a newborn insect. Ruanmei didn't flinch. She gave me a flat, indifferent look. Newly born life does possess a unique aesthetic, she replied calmly. I went quiet. I made a mental note right then. The next time I ran into Nanook, the Aeon of Destruction, I was going to punch him a few extra times just to vent my frustration. Working with me meant Ruanmei would eventually face other Ians. She knew that. She just didn't expect it to happen so soon. For the next few days, things were surprisingly quiet. I spent my time like I always did. I recorded the status of sentient curios. I handled chores. I chatted with the researchers to learn about their lives. Sometimes I played video games with Silver Wolf and Silver Moon. I used those sessions to give them a bit of scammer-style education, teaching them things that might or might not be true. And when I was bored, I made Ruanmei bake pastries for me. Under my supervision, She settled the life forms she'd created in the desert. She started living on the space station semi-permanently. Sometimes she helped me log data. Sometimes she read in the first floor of my library. Asta arranged an office for her, but the staff noticed something. Wanmei was always in my room. She was often seen carrying tea and snacks toward my door. The rumors started flying immediately. Some said she was doing it voluntarily. Others whispered that I had some kind of blackmail on her. A few even thought we were an old couple trying to patch things up after a fight. When researchers asked me about it, I told them the truth, as much as I could, anyway. I told them it was just a professional partnership. Nobody believed me. The story of us locking fingers hadn't left the station yet, but inside those walls, everyone knew. Aside from the gossip about us, the second hottest topic was the news of the Aeon of Life. The Interastral Peace Corporation had started broadcasting reports. The veil was being lifted. Rumors spread that the Aeon of Life had once fought the Aeon of Destruction. Ancient records from certain civilizations described a dark-skinned, white-haired god with a long braid, a bringer of disaster. Then, a father god had struck him out of the star system. Those civilizations called me Father God because they viewed the Aeon of Life as a stern, paternal figure. The records didn't explicitly say we fought, but people love a good story. They connected the dots to Nanook instantly. Wanmei heard the news too. During a break, she sat in my office and poured herself a cup of tea. "So, you have an old grudge with destruction," she said. She still wasn't 100% sure I was an Aeon, but for the sake of our partnership, she acted like she believed it. It made communication faster. I sat next to her and took a bite of one of her pastries. I didn't answer her question directly. "This tastes good," I muttered instead. Wanmei was getting used to my personality. I had a strange sense of humor and a weirdly high level of charisma. As she sat there thinking, I dropped a bombshell. "By the way," I said, "do you think creating an Aeon would be an interesting project?" She didn't rush to answer. She took a sip of tea, likely adding unparalleled ambition or delusional arrogance to her mental file on me. "As the Aeon of Life," she asked calmly, "have you ever created one?" "No," I admitted, "but I can try soon. I'll use the Aeon of Destruction as my starting point." Then I shifted gears completely. "You make pastries often. Do you know how to make chocolate?" She tried to find the link between the two topics. "The main ingredient is cocoa powder, then you add." No, that's too much work," I interrupted. "There's an easier way. You take a piece of finished chocolate, melt it down, add the ingredients you like, put it in a mold, and let it cool. A new piece of chocolate is born." Wanmei caught on. "You want to take the Aeon of Destruction and—" I smiled. "Cocoa powder is hard to find. But chocolate is everywhere, isn't it?" I broke off a small piece of pastry. "The difference between Nanook and chocolate is that chocolate doesn't move. He does. But even if we can't get the whole bar, we can still snap off a piece." Wanmei's lips curled into a faint smile. I couldn't tell if it was praise or sarcasm. "My dear pastry chef," she said softly, "be careful not to let the chocolate bite your tongue. Your assistant is looking forward to the finished product." I popped the rest of the pastry into my mouth. "Forget chocolate. I'd rather have your plum blossom cakes touching my taste buds." She stopped smiling and picked up a cake herself. "They are delicious," she warned. "But you should still be careful not to bite your tongue." 24 hours passed. It was the calm before the storm. I spent the time teaching Wanmei some deeper life science theories, explaining why some of her past experiments had failed. I left her in the office to digest the information. I took every single one of her new plum blossom cakes and headed to the master control zone. On my way, I passed two researchers arguing loudly. "Nanook definitely lost that fight," one yelled. "Otherwise, that civilization wouldn't exist anymore." "I'm just saying we don't have the full picture," the other replied. "Why are you so worked up? Are you a believer of the life Aeon now?" "Hey, I'm just being objective. I wish they'd fight again so we could observe it. You just want to watch the world burn. What are you, a masked fool?" I walked past them and found Asta, the acting station lead. Her pink hair was brighter than March 17th's. Her skin was pale and clear. From a normal perspective, she looked fine. But from my microscopic perspective, I could see every cell and microbe. It was enough to make a normal person's skin crawl. I looked her up and down, staring intently at her neck. I concluded she'd been bathing regularly and using disinfectant. I switched back to normal vision. Asta felt someone watching her and turned around. Mr. Bai Yin, do you need something? I had reminded Asta many times not to use formal titles with me. She still slipped up. In this space station, aside from Ruan Mei, I was the only person who could speak to Madame Herta as an equal. Even Ruan Mei didn't joke with Herta. But over the past year, the staff had seen me tease Herta's puppets in ways that would make anyone else vanish. Asta looked at me, her expression a mix of curiosity and caution. You're just as cute as the little guys living on you, I said. She froze. She looked down at her clothes, then back at me. Is there something on me? I shrugged. Oh well, you can pretend there isn't. A flash of panic crossed her face. It made her look even more charming. Mr. Bai Yin, please don't scare me, she said, her voice trembling slightly. She was smart, though. She caught herself quickly. You're just making another one of your strange jokes, aren't you? You can choose to believe it's a joke, I replied vaguely. That's not funny anymore. If anyone else had said it, she would have dismissed them as a fraud. But I was an emanator of life. If I said I saw something, it usually meant I saw something normal people couldn't perceive. I saw I had pushed the joke a bit too far. The human body is essentially a factory for microbes, I explained. We produce billions of them every year. Normally, you don't need to care. I gave her an apologetic smile. I was just bored. Sorry for the scare. Asta let out a long sigh of relief. So that's what you meant. Mr. Bai Yin, I assume you didn't come all this way just to mess with me? Despite my weird sense of humor, most people on the station liked me. Asta knew more than the average researcher. To her, I was an incredibly powerful figure who lacked even a hint of arrogance. I was approachable, almost too approachable. I looked out at the distant stars. I just wanted some chocolate. I figured I'd stop by the internal purchasing department for some sweets. I see, Asta said. She suddenly remembered something. Madame Herta said if I saw you, I should ask if you knew the details of the battle between the Aeon of Life and the Aeon of Destruction. Of course I know, I said. Tell her I'll trade that information for her childhood records. I want photos of her as a brat, preferably ones where she's throwing a tantrum on the floor. Tell her the deal is the same as last time. I won't leak them. Asta blinked, stunned. Is it really okay to say that to her? I smiled. Why wouldn't it be? She knows it's coming from me. She won't blame you. All right, Asta agreed. I could see her brain working, trying to figure out how to deliver that message without getting fired. She had heard the rumors. People said I was friendly, but there was something terrifying happening under the surface. Over the last year, many researchers realized I knew them better than they knew themselves. Asta had dismissed it as me being observant of their habits and being a gentleman. But now she watched me walk away and felt a chill. I was starting to move in on Madame Herta. If this kept going, I would eventually know Herta better than she knew herself. I headed back to my office. Ruan Mei was still there, hunched over the desk. She was focused on the experimental data I had corrected for her. Some of my notes made her eyes light up with realization. Others she viewed with skepticism, unable to fully trust my theories yet. When I entered, she turned her head. Her emerald eyes met mine. Even behind that cold, elegant mask, I could read her. There was a faint trace of joy, a bit of resentment, and a lingering lack of trust. Resentment? Right. I should have saved her a piece of that plum blossom cake. I pulled out a bar of chocolate and offered it to her. Want some? No. Thank you, she said, turning back to her screen. I sat nearby and ate my chocolate in silence, watching her. Once the situation with Nanook was settled, she wouldn't be able to doubt my identity as an Aeon anymore. Trust would take time, just like it did with Asta and the researchers. It was a challenge. I wasn't going to rewrite her biology to make her love me. I wanted to use the most primitive methods to observe and influence the change of life naturally. To others, she might be a small speck on my infinite canvas. To me, every stroke was precious. One may notice my gaze. Do I look that interesting to you? She asked softly. New life always has a unique beauty, I replied. Time ticked by. This was the silence before the storm. I was looking forward to the rain, mostly because I was the one who had gathered the clouds in the first place. Somewhere else in the cosmos, at the hideout of the Stellaron hunters, others were feeling the same tension. Two silver-haired figures sat on a sofa. their thumbs flying across phone screens. One was tall, the other small. Behind them stood a woman with violet hair and a dangerous grace. Kafka watched Silver Wolf and the girl named Inu play. It was amusing to see a digital life form like Inu using a physical screen to manipulate data. If she did it directly, other players wouldn't stand a chance. Inu's physical body was a gift I had given her for her birthday. Kafka looked away from the game and checked her phone, browsing the latest coat styles. She glanced at Silver Wolf. "It's about to start," Kafka said. "Are you ready?" "Of course Silver Wolf didn't look up. Suddenly, she groaned. "I lost. Kafka, it's your fault for talking to me." Inu burst out laughing, covering her mouth. Kafka chuckled. Fine. My fault." Everything seemed normal here, but they all knew the storm was coming. If it weren't for Elio's script and Inu's confirmation, they would have found it hard to believe who I really was. Soon, Kafka and Silver Wolf would have to face an Aeon directly. It sounds a bit shocking when you say it out loud, but the truth was, the staff at Herta Space Station faced an Aeon every single day. They joked with me, shared meals, and spent their breaks gossiping about my relationship with Lady Ruanmei. They had no idea who I really was. Days passed in a flash. Outside the station, something was stirring. A restless swarm of life forms began closing in, and the observers in the master control zone started to notice the anomalies. Back in my office, Ruanmei and I sat together just like any other day. However, things were different this time. Inu had blocked all signals coming in or out, and the office door was electronically deadbolt. Asta's cries for help wouldn't reach us here. Herta wouldn't answer either. The only ones who would receive the distress signal were the nameless on the Astral Express. I closed my eyes, sensing every single life coordinate within the station. I was monitoring the progress of the Stellaron Hunter's script while ensuring the safety of the staff. Once I finished grading the Hunter's homework, I'd just have to wait for the big fish to bite. Ruanmei finished organizing the experimental data I had helped her adjust. Remembering her role as my assistant, she turned to me. "Is there anything I can help with?" she asked. "Not yet," I said, draining my tea in one gulp and handing her the empty cup. "Or rather, there isn't much you can do for now, but you can pour me another cup." She didn't complain. She stood up and poured a fresh cup from the floral teapot. As she moved to sit back down, I reached out my hand. "Do you know what I'm doing right now?" I asked. "Put your hand on mine." Ever since I had let go of her hand in front of the other researchers, I hadn't touched her again. She gently placed her hand on mine, clearly wanting to revisit that mysterious sensation from before. Suddenly, a flood of information rushed into her mind. Thousands of life forms appeared in her consciousness. She could see them moving or standing still, pinpointing their exact locations like coordinates on a map. But before she could dive deeper, I pulled my hand back. The information vanished instantly. Ruanmei stood there, looking dazed. It had been too brief. "If only I could feel it a bit longer," she whispered. "You're standing while I'm sitting," I said. "Holding hands like that would get tiring, wouldn't it? Pull your chair over. Let's find a more comfortable position. Unless, of course, you want to sit on my lap." "No," she replied simply, moving her chair next to mine. I laid my hand flat on the desk, an open invitation. "Come on. But remember, don't be greedy this time. Taking in too much information at once will cause problems." Her deep green eyes, calm as a forest pool, searched mine. "Is that why you let go last time?" I chuckled. "Why else? Did you think I was just being stingy?" "Can I take off my glove?" she asked. "You can." She pulled off the dark green fabric, revealing fingers as pale and delicate as jade. When her cool palm pressed against my hand, the sensation traveled straight to my brain. The life coordinates reappeared, far clearer than before. She could even sense the colors of their lives, some a cold, icy blue, others a fiery red. Each life had a primary tone, yet they were filled with vibrant, abstract hues like a living painting. She tried to push the boundaries of the map, wanting to see further, but a familiar voice echoed in her head. "I told you, don't be greedy. You can't handle that much data yet." Ruanmei snapped back to reality and looked at me. My eyes were fixed on her, my brow slightly furrowed. "Are you worried about me?" she asked. "What do you think?" I countered. "I've put a lot of effort into making you a suitable partner. I'd hate to see my hard work go up in flames during an experiment." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. During our cooperation, my life doesn't just belong to me. I will cherish it more. Thank you for the reminder. I smiled. You don't have to look at my attitude toward you with absolute logic, but if that helps you for now, then fine. Please, do cherish the life that belongs to me. I will, she whispered, closing her eyes to focus on the signals again. While Wanmei's vision was limited, mine was absolute. I watched the restless life forms outside finally make their move. In the master control zone, the screens in front of Asta suddenly flashed blood red. A warning blared, defense system failure. Investigating cause. A researcher ran up, panicked. Station led Asta. The security systems are down. I tried to send a message, but the signal is being jammed. Stay calm, Asta said, trying to soothe them. The main system has detected it. We're working on it. What is that? Someone screamed, pointing toward the void of space. It's the Antimatter Legion, an observer shouted. They're right on top of us. Asta looked up. Monsters in shades of black and white were swarming the station, their bodies flickering with unstable purple flames. When a Void Ranger warped directly in front of them, everyone realized the truth. These monsters didn't want to burn the nearby planet. They wanted to incinerate this station. A dark, humanoid monster swung a blade-like arm toward an unarmed researcher. It was too fast. The security guards couldn't react in time. It looked like the end. Thud. The blade, which should have cleaved the researcher's shoulder, slammed harmlessly into the wall. Even the Void Ranger froze in confusion. For a split second, its body had moved against its will, forcing the strike to miss. The security team didn't waste the opening and immediately opened fire. Back in the office, I sat calmly with my tea. Wanmei, eyes still closed, whispered, "What are those dark life forms that just appeared?" "Nanook's Antimatter Legion," I replied. "You blocked the signals and locked the door. Do you intend to stay out of this?" I took a sip of tea. Am I not already involved? I looked at her, playing the role of a patient teacher. I don't usually like cold metaphors, but you can think of the station as a chessboard. The Legion is the black pieces. The people here are the white pieces. Are you playing the white pieces against the black? She asked. No, I said, my voice dropping an octave. I'm ensuring the white pieces stay safe. But I should correct you on one thing. I don't just control the white pieces. I can move every single piece on this board whenever I want. By deconstructing their physiology through their life coordinates, I could predict and override their every move. I didn't like controlling bodies. It felt beneath me. But for now, it was the perfect way to keep the game interesting. I wasn't about to let my new abilities gather dust. About 2 system hours after the Antimatter Legion launched their full-scale invasion of Herta Space Station, the real show began. A woman with purple hair moved through the chaos with a relaxed, elegant stride. She stopped in front of a flickering screen as a voice crackled through her comms. It was Silverwolf. System time, 23:47 and 15 seconds, Silverwolf said. You're right on time, Kafka. Kafka smiled softly. Elio's visions are never wrong. We're about to encounter an Aeon when we stuff that thing inside, aren't we? What comes after that? The universe gets a massive expansion pack, Silverwolf replied, answering her own question. It's getting interesting. Interesting was an understatement. That looming battle would shake the cosmos, but it was just the beginning. The rest wasn't their concern. Kafka kept the line open as she strolled down the corridors, casually taking down Legion monsters that crossed her path. She eventually reached the reception center. The researchers had already fled. The place was a ghost town, except for a girl with a silver-gray ponytail sitting on the desk. Silverwolf was playing with a strangely shaped pistol. Kafka walked up, curious. What have you found there? Can I see? Silverwolf showed it to her. It was one of Herta's curios. It gave a rating from 0 to 100 to any living creature in its sights. Is that actually fun? Kafka asked. I doubt even Herta used it on an Aeon. Silverwolf hopped off the desk and tucked the rating pistol away. I'm going to try it on by Yin in a bit. Kafka didn't mind. Do whatever you want. If it's not in the script, it doesn't matter. Where's the target? Silverwolf pointed toward a gallery behind the left door. There's a room back there holding a specific curio. The Stellaron is inside. They left the reception area and headed for a monitoring room at the end of the hall. Silverwolf hacked the system, finding the only terminal that wasn't glitching. Kafka watched her work. What's this? Curio number 211. The blind spot, Silver Wolf explained. It creates a simple field that makes things easy to ignore. But once everything else stops being flashy, it stands out like a sore thumb. Herta tried to hide her treasure with a simple trick. The simpler the method, the harder it is to crack, Kafka recited. Isn't that our motto? Silver Wolf finished the bypass. A curtain of light appeared on the wall, revealing a hidden space. Kafka led the way. They stepped through the light into a small, cramped room. In the center, a containment device held a floating orb of golden energy. The Stellaron. A seed of disaster, the cancer of all worlds. Herta had locked it away to stop it from spreading. Release the vessel, Kafka said. It's time to meet our old friend. Silver Wolf swiped across a holographic screen. A girl with long gray hair appeared in the center of the room. But she wasn't alone. A black-haired young man appeared right beside her. Good evening, ladies, I said, my voice calm and clear. I'm here to grade your homework. Kafka looked at me, a playful smirk touching her lips. My eyes felt deep as the stars to her, yet I radiated a strange, approachable warmth. People say the Trailblaze is the aeon closest to humanity, she mused. But I think you might have them beat. Why closest? I asked, spreading my hands. Do I not count as human? You're insulting me the moment we meet. While I played along with my usual humor, Silver Wolf pulled out the rating pistol. The eye on the gun snapped open and locked onto me. It spun frantically, round and round, before finally giving up. Measurement impossible, the gun announced. It shut its eye and went limp in Silver Wolf's hand. It was dead. Kafka patted the disappointed girl on the shoulder. Exactly the result I expected. I didn't waste any more time. I walked over to the female vessel. Even though she was fully clothed, I could see every fiber of her construction. It was like looking through glass. An exquisite design, I praised, then tilted my head. Well, for non-professionals, anyway. As a container for a Stellaron, she's qualified. But she's not perfect. I reached out and pressed my index finger against the vessel's forehead. I started grading the work. With a few mental adjustments, I tweaked her structure to increase her efficiency with the Stellaron's power. I added a little something extra to amplify that energy. This is the power to master the fragmentum, I explained to my students as the vessel changed under my touch. In the future, if she masters this, she could become the master of every Stellaron disaster in the universe. Kafka didn't flinch. She kept that smile on her face. You're very bold. It feels wrong coming from a Stellaron hunter, but aren't you afraid she'll become a scourge to the cosmos? I pulled my hand back. The modifications were complete. I looked at Kafka and smiled. The universe should be glad that the future Lord of the Fragmentum will be raised and guided by Himiko and the others. And of course, I'll be helping too. Silver Wolf had already bypassed the Stellaron's security. It was time to put the seed in the soil. Can we start now, teacher? Kafka asked, her tone teasing. Go ahead, I said, stepping back to give her room. Just be careful not to flatten our daughter's chest when you press it in. Kafka didn't answer immediately. She took the Stellaron from its housing and stood before the girl. Just before she acted, she glanced back at me with a wink. I'll be careful. She focused. She braced the vessel with one hand and pressed the glowing Stellaron into the girl's chest with the other. The golden light that filled the room began to fade, sinking through the clothes and skin into the girl's body. Time to wake up, Kafka whispered in her ear. Consciousness flooded back. The girl felt like she had been in a long dream that was already slipping away. She opened her eyes and saw me first. Her golden pupils moved slowly, taking in the room. The woman with purple hair, the petite girl with the silver ponytail, and me. Where am I? She managed to mutter. A space station, Kafka replied simply. But that doesn't matter. Now listen to me. Your mind was a mess. You didn't know who you were, why you were here, or what you were supposed to do next. I looked at you, and I could see the confusion in your eyes. I felt familiar to you, but you weren't sure if you could trust me. None of that mattered. What mattered was that I was leaving. I was about to drop you right in the middle of this chaos and walk away. Listen to me, Kafka whispered to the girl, ignoring me for a moment. From now on, you don't need to think about the past or doubt yourself. You're going to face a lot of danger. You'll find yourself in terrible situations. But you'll also find wonderful things. You'll find companions who feel like family. You'll start adventures you never dreamed of. She leaned in closer. At the end of the journey, all the riddles that haunt you will be solved. This is the future Elio saw. Do you like it? The girl, whom we called Xing, looked lost. She didn't answer. No, a voice said. It wasn't Xing. It was me. I was standing off to the side, whispering with Silver Wolf. Kafka and Xing both looked over at us. I just waved them off. Keep talking, I said with a grin. Don't mind us. We're just having a private chat. I turned back to Silver Wolf and lowered my voice. I don't mind a little bit of pay-to-win gaming, but that kid is getting out of hand. You need to rein him in. Silver Wolf opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. I already talked to Inu. He promised to cut back. So, you're actually trying to scam me for more credits, aren't you? Silver Wolf's eyes flickered. She looked away, her face reddening slightly. What? No. How could you think that of me? You're a terrible liar. I laughed. Kafka's got you beat by a mile. She thought the hustle was over, but I pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen a few times. A second later, her phone buzzed. She didn't even bother reaching for it. She just projected a holographic screen in the air to check the notification. 200 million credits. Transferred. She froze, staring at the number. Go spend it, I said softly. Just don't let the kid blow it all at once. Thanks for looking after Inu for me. To an Aeon who had walked the cosmos for eons, money was just a tool for communication. It was pocket change. If I really wanted wealth, the civilizations I created would drown me in gold. But I didn't want to take their hard work for nothing. Besides, if my children knew their creator was out here grinding for credits, they'd probably die of embarrassment. I reached out and pinched Silver Wolf's cheeks, stretching them into a smile. Next time you want something, just ask. Don't lie. You're a mother now. You have to set a good example for the boy. She swatted my hands away, her face flushing deeper. First of all, I wasn't lying. I was just anticipating his needs. Second, why do you think a Stellaron hunter can raise a good kid? I don't believe in the Stellaron hunters, I told her. I believe in you. While we were flirting with disaster, Kafka had finished her instructions. Xing had collapsed onto the cold floor, unconscious, waiting for the express crew to find her. Time's up, Kafka called out, checking her watch. If we don't leave now, we're going to run into the nameless. Silver Wolf looked at me one last time, then turned toward Kafka. Let's go. Kafka smirked at her. If I hadn't interrupted, were you planning on leaving the hunters to join him? Don't be like that, I said, a gentle smile crossing my face. If I wanted to kidnap you too, I wouldn't make it this complicated. I just genuinely like everyone. Kafka laughed. Nobody is stupid enough to take that as a confession. You'd say the same thing to a dog. There are many kinds of liking someone, I countered. But honestly, Kafka, you're as beautiful as Pepe in my eyes. Who's Pepe? Silver Wolf asked. The lead researcher's pet dog, I answered immediately. Silver Wolf's expression didn't even flicker. Hilarious. All right, jokes aside, Kafka said, her tone turning playful but firm. We really have to go? Take care of our Silver Wolf. And take care of our daughter. With a final wave, they vanished into the shadows. I felt their life signatures fade as they moved away from the station. At the same time, two other signatures were rushing toward this room, March 7th and Dan Hong. I walked over to the unconscious Xing and knelt beside her. I placed my hand on her forehead. Sorry, kid, I whispered. You're about to have a rough time. I infused her body with a hidden dose of painkillers and a slow-release regenerative serum. It wouldn't kick in now, but it would save her life when she eventually took a hit from the Doomsday Beast. As for the power I gave her earlier, that would stay locked away until she made contact with the Stellaron. I stood up and vanished just as the doors hissed open. Xing felt like she was floating. Through the fog of sleep, she heard voices. A man's voice, steady and clear. A woman's voice, bright and energetic. His vitals are weak, the man said. March, prepare for mouth-to-mouth. Wait, what? The girl squeaked. Okay, Bayan taught me how to do this. It's my first time, so... Xing opened her eyes. A cute, pink-haired face was inches away from hers, leaning in. She's awake, the man said. The pink-haired girl, March 7th, jumped back. She quickly helped Xing sit up and started firing off questions. Are you okay? Can you hear me? Do you remember your name? I'm Xing, she muttered. Xing? That's a pretty name, March grinned. I'm March 7th. This is Dan Hung. March paused, looking around the empty room. By the way, did you see a guy here? Black hair, black eyes, kind of handsome? Black hair, black eyes. A flicker of memory sparked in Xing's mind. Someone saying no while Kafka was talking. But as she tried to grasp the memory, a wave of dizziness and pain crashed over her. She groaned, clutching her head. I can't remember, she gasped. Hey, it's okay, March said, supporting her. Don't force it. Asta said not to worry about Bayan's safety, so he's probably fine. If he really is an Aeon like he claims, he can handle himself. Not that I believe that crazy talk for a second. March looked around one last time, huffing. Where did that guy disappear to? I wasn't far. I was sitting comfortably in my office, sipping a cup of hot tea that Ruan Mei had just brewed for me. The show was just beginning. I could feel the entire space station through the fluctuations of time and space. Every life form had its own unique coordinate, and right now, I could sense an overwhelming wave of worry coming from March 7th. It was a bit funny, really. I had already told her who I was, but she clearly didn't believe me. Not that I blamed her. The Antimatter Legion's attack on Herta Space Station was nearing its end. So far, remarkably, no one had been seriously hurt. But my part in this story was only just beginning. I was waiting for the big fish to bite, that moment when Nanook, the Aeon of Destruction, would cast his gaze downward. That would be my cue to step onto the stage. I looked at Ruan Mei. Her biological composition fascinated me, and the idea of creating an Aeon intrigued her just as much. We both knew that if we couldn't even master the creation of an Aeon, then creating a theoretically perfect life form was nothing but a dream. Snapping off a piece of chocolate is just the start. Serving the full dessert is where the real work begins. Ruan Mei took a slow sip of her tea. The fresh, soft aroma lingered between us. She sat at the desk near me, quietly flipping through the research data I had organized for her. As the 81st member of the Genius Society and a premier expert in life sciences, no one would ever dare call her ignorant. Yet, even with all her brilliance, she was finding that her current knowledge wasn't enough to unravel the mysteries of an Aeon. She still hadn't figured out how to deconstruct that single strand of hair I gave her. I watched her, knowing she was looking for flaws in my data, hoping to catch me in a lie. But if my identity as an Aeon proved true, she didn't want to just be someone who served me tea. She wanted to be a qualified assistant, a partner who could share in the ultimate spoils of our cooperation. I took a sip of my own tea, feeling the cold rationality radiating from her. To change someone like Ruan Mei through primitive contact would be a long journey, but I had all the time in the world to mold her. Suddenly, a violent, powerful surge of life force approached the station. I felt it instantly. The Doomsday Beast was here. It was a monstrosity forged by the Antimatter Legion from the fragments of ancient beasts and the sorrow of 1,000 wars. It carried the collective will of dying beings, anger, pain, and lost joy, all bound into an engine of destruction. I waited quietly. Everything was unfolding exactly like the memories of my past life. Over in the Master Control Zone, I tracked Xing's life coordinate as she followed March 7th and Dan Hung to meet Himiko and Asta. The arrival of the Doomsday Beast sent a ripple of unease through everyone. March led the group toward the platform, clearing out small fry along the way, while the beast's massive life signature moved to intercept them. At the platform, the Doomsday Beast descended from the stars like a malevolent dragon. Himiko's brow furrowed. It had actually followed them. Its bat-like wings blotted out the sun, and its white armor shimmered with the purple glow of destruction. Two massive claws, one black and one white, slammed onto the platform, while smaller limbs gripped a dark gold antimatter engine. It let out a roar that shook the very foundation of the station, its glowing purple eyes fixed on the crew. The battle erupted instantly. Ice and fire clashed against the beast's hide. March 7th dodged attacks with practiced grace, her bow humming as she fired arrow after arrow. Himiko discarded her usual elegance, her chainsaw briefcase whirring with lethal intent. Dan Hung moved like a silent shadow, his spear striking with clinical precision. And then there was Xing. She was still confused about this world, but she didn't hesitate. She gripped her baseball bat tight and swung at the beast's engine alongside her new friends. She had only known them for a short time, but she already trusted them with her back. Looking at the monster, a spark of protective warmth rose in her golden eyes. She wouldn't let this thing take her new companions away. Her movements became fluid. Her strikes grew heavier. I noticed it from my office. She was tapping into the physical enhancements I had given her earlier than expected. The tide began to turn. A beam from Himiko's orbital satellite hammered into the beast's engine, causing a massive explosion. Xing and Himiko traded a look and leaped simultaneously. The chainsaw and the bat slammed into the engine at once. The dark gold core flickered and went dim. The beast began to slip from the platform. Its metallic neck slumped in defeat. But just as everyone exhaled, the beast snapped its head up. A beam of gold and purple light erupted from its maw, streaking directly toward March 7th, who was still recovering from her last move. She looked up, her eyes widening. She couldn't move in time. In that split second, Xing threw herself in front of March. She spread her arms wide, taking the full force of the destructive beam. The agony lasted only a moment before it vanished. Something inside her body was fighting back. As her consciousness drifted, she saw fragments of memories, a crack in reality, glowing with golden light. "It's time to begin your journey," a voice whispered. "Reach the end by your own will." A massive figure appeared in her vision, a man with bronze skin and white hair. That golden crack she saw was actually a scar on his chest. Suddenly, a sharp pain flared in her own chest, threatening to plunge her into a coma, but it receded just as quickly. It felt like an internal sedative was kicking in, allowing her to stay in this vision for just a moment longer. And that's when she saw it. Behind the white-haired man, another figure was quietly emerging. I saw a figure I didn't recognize, yet a strange sense of familiarity washed over me. In an instant, the newcomer transformed a glowing sphere in his hand into a sword with white wings. The bronze-skinned man tried to turn, but it was too late. The blade erupted through his back, piercing clean through his chest. A voice spoke, uttering words that defied understanding. Golden blood sprayed from the white-haired man's chest. A roar, identical to the cry of the doomsday beast, shattered the silence of the vision. From every corner of space, the antimatter legion swarmed toward the two figures. My vision blurred. My strength failed. I finally slipped into total darkness. Deep in a distant galaxy, civilization was sparse. Just moments ago, various planetary observatories had picked up a massive, white-haired presence flickering into existence. It was Nanook, the Aeon of Destruction. He wasn't alone. Behind him, the Antimatter Legion blotted out the stars like a terminal shadow. These civilizations had only recently contacted the Interastral Peace Corporation. They were young and fragile. They knew of the Eons. They knew that destruction meant the end of everything. Nanook stood there, a god among the stars, ready to leave after setting his monsters loose. For these people, fear and despair weren't just emotions. They were a death sentence. Then, another figure appeared. His face was a blur of shifting light and mist, impossible to define, but radiating a terrifying majesty mixed with an inexplicable warmth. His dark hair flowed like the currents of a nebula. He looked like an entity woven from light and shadow, pulsing with a vast, overwhelming life force. In his hand, he held a sphere etched with complex, spiraling patterns. Before Nanook could react, the sphere shifted into a sword. The stranger lunged, burying the blade into the Aeon's back. A whisper echoed through the entire galaxy, though no one could hear the words. In the observatories, the scientists were stunned. They watched the impossible. Nanook's body had been pierced. The Aeon of Destruction was trying to warp away, but he was pinned, frozen for a heartbeat that felt like an eternity. "Our world is still doomed," someone whispered in the dark. But then, a miracle happened. The Antimatter Legion didn't attack the planets. They turned back. Every monster, every beast, ignored the helpless civilizations and charged toward the mysterious figure. It wasn't just a command from Nanook. It was an instinct. The life force radiating from the stranger was so intense, so vibrant, that the Legion, beings of pure destruction, saw him as their ultimate enemy. They were like moths to a flame. To them, Dying in the pursuit of destruction was the highest glory. Space warped. Doomsday beasts and soldiers collided with the stranger. Nanook, recovering from the strike, raised his arms. He unleashed a blinding golden power, trading blow for blow in a desperate counterattack. The two Eons clashed, their power shaking the foundations of the sector. Luckily, the planets were far enough away, or perhaps one of the entities shielded them from the shockwaves. The screens in the observatories went white. When the image returned, Nanook was gone. He had completed his warp, but he hadn't left whole. The mysterious figure remained. The sphere in his hand had transformed into a tray. Resting upon it were the severed bronze arms of the Aeon of Destruction. The Antimatter Legion had vanished entirely. Then, the figure appeared directly in front of one of the planets. The people trembled. Was this a savior or a new executioner? "Look at his other hand," someone screamed in the observatory. Zooming in, they saw hundreds of humans standing in his palm. They were the crews of starships that had gone missing the moment destruction arrived. The giant hand descended through the clouds, gently placing the survivors onto an open field. The people on the ground waved goodbye as the godlike figure began to fade. He hadn't come to judge them. He had come to bring the lost ones home. A reporter from the IPC watched the screen, trembling. He was already drafting the headline in his head. Years ago, the masked fools told a story. They claimed the Aeon of Elation once ambushed Nanook, wounding him so badly his golden blood became an ingredient for tavern drinks. No one ever fully believed it. The fools were liars by trade. But today, there was no joke. Today, the galaxy had witnessed a new truth. Destruction had been bled, and a new power had made its mark upon the stars. This wasn't like the stories in the masked fools' records. Those were rumors, but this was different. This was a battle witnessed by the entire galaxy. A recorded war between eons. This news was going to cause a massive earthquake among the followers of Elation. Back on the observatory screens, the godlike figure, the one who felt so familiar despite his blurred face, had already vanished. The people watching didn't know where he went, but they bowed their heads in deep respect. Inside Herta Space Station, the attack from the Antimatter Legion was finally over. The staff were still shaking, huddled in the emergency shelters of the master control zone. Suddenly, the elevator door slid open. A familiar figure stepped out. My black hair was a bit messy, but my eyes were as bright as the stars. "Is everyone okay?" I asked. I already knew the answer, of course. I could feel the life force of every person on this station, but I had to play the part. I needed to ease their fear. "Bai Yen, you're alive," one staff member shouted, his voice cracking with relief. "We thought you were a goner." Another researcher squinted at me, pointing a finger. "Wait, what's that on your face?" The others looked over. A streak of shimmering gold liquid was smeared across my cheek. It looked like it had just splashed there. I pulled out a tissue, wiped the blood away, and tossed it into a nearby trash can. "Oh, this." I laughed. "Just a chocolate candy." It exploded when I bit into it. I wondered if the girl named Stell, whose destiny I had already shifted, had a habit of digging through trash cans. If she did, she might just find the blood of the Aeon of Destruction in there. I chatted and joked with the staff as I walked, calming their nerves until I reached Asta at the main control console. "I think I'm a bit late," I said. Asta, the young acting station lead, looked at me with an apologetic expression. "No, you aren't late at all. I'm the one who should apologize. I wasn't prepared for an emergency like this. I neglected our security, and when disaster struck, I had to call for outside help. I hope my SOS message didn't disturb your work." "Nobody can plan for everything, Asta," I replied softly. "Besides, we're friends. There's nothing wrong with asking a friend for help when things get out of hand." I chatted with her for a few more minutes before heading out. From a bystander's perspective, I wasn't responsible for this attack. I didn't even have to keep these people safe. But I've never been a cold observer. And as a friend, I felt a little guilty. I knew the disaster was coming and didn't warn her. Instead, I used the crisis as an excuse to beat up Nanook. To settle my conscience, I sent Asta a massive pile of credit points. I had my AI, Silver Moon, mask the transfer so it looked like pocket money from one of her wealthy elders. I knew her. She'd use every cent of her personal funds to repair the station anyway. Given my true age, calling myself her elder was actually an understatement. I was practically Herta's ancestor. With my guilt paid off, it was time to go home and deal with my chocolate. Before I reached my office, I paused to check the life signals of the express crew. Stell was awake now. Herta would likely try to convince her to stay for research, but the result was obvious. Stell would choose the path of trailblaze. I wouldn't let Herta poke and prod at my daughter anyway. Besides, Herta's attention was about to be completely consumed by the battle between life and destruction. The express crew would probably stay a while to help with repairs. Nameless travelers are always soft-hearted. I knew that back when I dealt with Akivali. I'd have plenty of time to look after them later. Whether it was the deal I made with Akivali or my own promise as a friend, I intended to keep it. I pulled out my phone and sent a quick message to March 7th and the others to let them know I was safe. Then, I walked back into my office. Ruanmei was still there, sitting at my desk. She took a bite of a plum blossom cake, chewed slowly, and swallowed. She turned her elegant gaze toward me. "Did you get what you wanted?" she asked, her voice calm. "Is it time to prove your identity to your ignorant assistant?" I didn't let her words sting. I just smiled. "I got it. 2 of them, actually." Before I could explain, Ruanmei's phone buzzed on the desk. She tapped the screen with her gloved finger. A holographic projection of Herta's adult avatar popped up. "Hey, Ruanmei," Herta's voice rang out. "Good news. We can move up the plan to include the Aeon of Life in the simulated universe. Not by much, but it's a start." Ruanmei remained expressionless. "What happened?" "Life and Destruction just had a massive brawl," Herta said, sounding excited. "Come to my office later. I've got something amazing to show you. You'll definitely be interested." Ruanmei looked away from the hologram and stared at me. I was currently stuffing a piece of plum blossom cake into my mouth. I caught her eye and gave her an awkward, polite smile, crumbs clinging to the corner of my lips. "News travels fast. Viyen, you're there too, aren't you?" Herta's voice came through the phone. "I assume you've heard the news?" "Of course," I said, wiping my mouth with a tissue and turning serious. "I got the news firsthand from the great, handsome, wise, and peerless Aeon of Life himself." I could practically feel Herta rolling her eyes through the speaker. "Stop pretending to be a fanatic. A true believer of life would call him Father God, not the Aeon of Life." Fine, I muttered. I wasn't about to call myself Father God out loud. "Since you know about it, come to my office with Ruanmei," Herta commanded. "The price is negotiable. By the way, do you have any photos of yourself wetting the bed as a kid?" "No," I snapped. Herta didn't give me a chance to joke further. "The IPC is sending the observation footage in 10 minutes. Don't be late." She hung up. I picked up my tea, it was lukewarm now, and took a sip. "Well," I sighed. "It looks like our private viewing of Nanook's severed arms will have to wait. But we can go watch Herta admire my godly combat stance." That figure on the screen was my true form. The civilizations I created would recognize it instantly. I could already imagine my children bragging to IPC reporters about how brave their god was. The IPC would probably release the footage in parts to keep the hype going, saving my full image for the grand finale. The IPC hadn't released the full footage yet. They were smart. They knew how to build hype. Herta, however, had her own connections. She wouldn't be satisfied with the scraps the public got. Beside me, Ruanmei remained silent, her eyes distant and thoughtful. I knew what she was doing. She was analyzing me, trying to reconcile the playful researcher sitting here with the terrifying power of an Aeon. 10 minutes was a long time to wait. I didn't bother her. I had my own plans to refine. I thought about the chocolate I'd snapped off earlier, Nanook's severed arms. Now came the hard part, the reconstruction. Destruction was more than just a word. It was a fundamental force. Those arms weren't just meat and bone. They were the physical manifestation of Nanook's power. I needed to melt that concept down and strip away the raw, mindless ruin. I didn't want to create a mini Nanook. I wanted something new. I already had the secret ingredient ready in my mind. A few minutes later, Ruanmei and I arrived at Herta's office. One of Herta's puppets was already active, standing by the consoles. She wasn't the type to wait for people, but she'd been busy tweaking the simulated universe database. In the original timeline, Herta should have been obsessed with the Stellaron inside the girl named Stell. She would have been dragging her into experiments by now. But I had changed everything. For a researcher obsessed with Ians, What could be more important than watching two of them actually go to war? The simulated universe was just a program. This was the real thing. Herta was vibrating with an excitement she tried desperately to hide. She tapped away at floating screens, her back to us. The IPC is being slow, she muttered. Just wait a second. Understood, Ruanmei said softly. A rare, faint smile touched Ruanmei's lips. Ever since we started working together, she hadn't truly believed I was an Aeon. She saw the value in my research, sure, but she'd been open about her skepticism. She'd even joked about apologizing if I proved her right. But she wanted to be wrong. Even if it cost her a massive apology or a heavy price, she craved the truth. If I was real, it meant she finally had a partner who understood the essence of life. She had spent her whole life hitting walls in her research. With an Aeon by her side, the fog would finally clear. I could sense her heart racing. I glanced between the two of them. Two geniuses, both holding their breath for me. How do you make two of the smartest women in the galaxy this excited at the same time? Simple. You go pick a fight with Nanook and make sure someone films it. I knew there would be cameras. Destruction doesn't happen in a vacuum. Nanook always picks a stage with an audience, even if he's planning to kill them all. Right now, the wounded Lord of Destruction was hiding somewhere in the vastness of space. The Aeon of Elation, was probably already hunting him down just to laugh in his face. I missed Aha's punchable face, but I wasn't ready for a reunion yet. I'd probably just end up hitting him. Is the IPC going to make the footage public? I asked Herta. Usually, Herta gave one-word answers to anyone who annoyed her. But I was a special case. I was her best lead on the secrets of life. She opened another screen and sent a quick message. The IPC didn't keep a genius like her waiting. They replied in seconds. They bought the exclusive rights, Herta said without looking back. They're going to release snippets to build heat. If anyone wants the full video, they'll have to pay a staggering amount of credits. Even then, the IPC might not sell. I grinned. They really know how to squeeze a profit, don't they? I should tell the Aeon of Life to start charging them taxes. I've been spending a lot of credits lately. Maybe my children in the IPC can spare a cut. Herta paused, her fingers hovering over the keys. You're getting awfully casual with how you talk about your god. She didn't doubt my loyalty, but she couldn't wrap her head around the lack of respect. I just laughed. He won't mind, I said. I could curse him and he wouldn't care. Not that I would. Nobody is bored enough to curse themselves. Herta went back to her data. I always thought someone like Ruanmei would be the perfect emanator of life. I'm curious about how your Aeon picks his representatives. Ruanmei has the talent, I admitted. But for now, she's better suited as my assistant. Oh, the data is here, Herta announced. She clicked a button, and the download began. I leaned back, feeling the tension in the room peak. Got any popcorn? I asked. No, Herta snapped. Sunflower seeds? You can't have a premiere without snacks and a folding chair. Herta, this is poor planning. Herta rolled her eyes at me. Do you think this is a street fight? I put on a dramatic, posh accent. Oh, my dear Lady Herta, is there really a difference between Ian's clashing and two neighbors pulling hair? At least the neighbors don't usually bleed stars. You truly possess a mind of exquisite wisdom. I was clearly baiting her, and she knew it. She gave me a flat look. I don't know what kind of deal you offered Ruanmei to make her your assistant. She's actually listening to you. It's because she's obsessed with my body, I said, deadpan. If you don't want to tell me, just shut up, Herta sighed. She swiped her hand, expanding the video feed so it filled the room. All three of us stared at the glowing screen. I'm telling the truth. I protested, sounding wounded. Why does nobody believe me? Yeah, Herta said dismissively. I hope you two are very happy together. Now be quiet. She hit play. The screen flickered, and the void of space appeared, ready to show them exactly what I was. I couldn't wait to see the footage of that battle. Ruanmei, who had been lost in thought, finally focused her gaze on the floating, translucent data screen. Her calm, expressionless face shifted. In her green eyes, usually as still as a deep pond, a spark of long-lost light flickered, as if a ray of sun had finally hit the water. As the two geniuses concentrated on the screen, I couldn't help but ruin the mood. It really is a tragedy that we don't have popcorn, I sighed. Herta ignored my commentary. She hit play. The screen flickered to life. The first image was Nanook, the Aeon of Destruction. He stood tall amidst the stars, his white hair and long, tied braids swaying in the vacuum of space. His golden eyes surveyed the surrounding civilizations with chilling indifference. Even through a silent video, the pressure radiating from him was suffocating. Antimatter legions swarmed out from his position, rushing toward planets where life and civilization flourished. To them, the birth of the universe was a mistake. Civilization was a cancer growing among the stars. Conflict was the only language they spoke. Their goal was simple: wipe out every flicker of life in the cosmos. I stopped joking. The video was rolling, and it would be rude to keep talking. Besides, I wasn't nearly as interested in the footage as they were. After all, I was one of the people actually there. The observation equipment used by these interstellar civilizations couldn't capture sound from such a vast distance. The office was so quiet I could have heard a pin drop. Ruanmei and Herta were glued to the screen. My mind, however, began to wander. I started wondering when I should hit up the Interastral Peace Corporation for my share of the royalties on this video. I had planned the general direction of these events before I acted, but I wasn't some all-knowing scholar. There was still room for surprises. I had plenty of credits in storage, but I didn't want to just sit around and watch my savings dwindle. I didn't want to rob anyone, and I certainly didn't want to take money from my children, the civilizations I had created. I imagined a light cone made from this very moment. I'd call it Life Contemplating Economic Problems. If I put that in a museum for my civilizations to see, they'd probably all take turns slapping themselves in the face out of sheer disbelief. Wait, Herta's puppet voiced. Before I realized it, the image on the screen had changed. A figure had appeared directly behind Nanook. Herta pulled up the control interface, paused the video, and zoomed in on the new arrival. This was my moment. "Oh, look at that," I remarked. "What a handsome, heroic, and peerless figure." Herta snapped at me, her patience gone. Fine. You're very loyal to your Aeon. Now shut up." A faint smile touched Ruanmei's lips. The sphere in her hand seemed to pulse with the evolution of infinite life. "I agree," she said softly. "That figure truly is beautiful." I grinned. "You have excellent taste, my dear assistant." "Stop flirting, you too," Herta grumbled. She swiped several images onto the side of the screen. They were photos the IPC had collected of the Aeon of Life, mostly shots of ancient statues. I felt a shiver of disgust looking at them. Those statues represented my children's faith and their extreme fanaticism. Fortunately, while their religious culture was intense, they also worshipped science. Why? Because their father god told them to. Herta compared the video to the photos. Based on appearance, it's a match. It's definitely the Aeon of Life. She turned to me. "Did he tell you why he decided to show up behind destruction right then?" "He didn't tell me," I answered. It didn't matter who asked, my answer would be the same. I wasn't lying. He really hadn't told me anything. I just happened to know the answer because I was him. Herta gave up on me and hit play again. The figure behind Nanook moved. The sphere in his hand transformed into a long sword, which he plunged straight through Nanook's chest. Golden blood erupted into the void. "Incredible," Herta whispered, her voice tinged with excitement. If I wasn't looking at unedited observation footage, I'd say this was impossible. Ruanmei looked away from the screen and stared at me. Her voice remained flat, but her eyes were searching. Perhaps even more unbelievable things are happening right now. I gave her a meaningful smile. "Exactly. And if you like digging through trash cans, Lady Herta, you might find something even more shocking in one of the bins on this station." Herta was used to my nonsense by now. "Like what?" "Chocolate-filled syrup," I said. Herta sighed. I should have known. Another meaningless joke. If Nanook could hear that, he'd probably complain that I was overusing the chocolate gag. Not that the real Nanook had a sense of humor. I waited patiently for them to finish the video. Even if Ruanmei suspected my identity now, we couldn't have a real conversation yet. This was just the foreplay. Trust would only truly be established, and our cooperation begun, once I showed them the trophies I took from Nanook's arms. Meanwhile, the IPC's marketing machine was in full swing. Researchers on the space station who spent too much time online were the first to notice. "Look at this. Look what the IPC just posted," someone shouted. "Life pierces destruction with a single blade?" "Let me see." "Wait, It's just a promotional image. It looks so real. So that's what the Aeon of Life looks like. Is this fake? No way. It's from the official Interastral Peace broadcast account. The news wasn't just hitting the space station. Masked fools across the galaxy were already screenshotting the images, preparing to print them out so they could mock the followers of destruction to their faces. Back in the office, the silent video ended. Once the two Ians had officially clashed, ordinary observation equipment couldn't track what happened next. What a shame, Herta muttered. I wish this fight had happened near a more developed civilization. We could have seen so much more. Herta turned to me, her puppet eyes searching my face. She asked if my Aeon would clash with destruction again. I just gave her a playful smile. I asked her when she had joined the elation, or if Noose would have an opinion on her new sense of humor. She sighed and looked away. She told me she should have known asking me was a waste of time. Then she added, with a clear note of annoyance, that she didn't even know why she'd invited me. According to her, I knew nothing and contributed less. I laughed. I decided to give her a little something extra. I told her a new Aeon would be born soon. She stared at me, trying to figure out if I was lying. I told her it wasn't a joke, it was intelligence. All she had to do was wait. Herta remained skeptical. She turned her attention to Ruanmei, noting that the elegant scientist seemed preoccupied. She asked if a recent experiment had failed, or if Ruanmei simply wasn't interested in the video of the Ians. Ruanmei snapped out of her thoughts. She asked if that was all the footage the IPC had sent. She wanted to end the viewing session. Her voice was calm, but I knew her mind was racing. She was desperate to see the trophies I'd mentioned, the severed limbs of Nanook. I had told her I'd grab two. It wasn't hard to connect the dots. Between the video, my claims, and the physical evidence I promised, doubting my identity would soon be impossible. For a woman obsessed with the essence of life and the secrets of the Ians, a partnership with me would clear the fog she'd been wandering in for years. She was ready to pay any price. Herta interrupted her thoughts, announcing there was one last clip. The screen flickered to life. It showed the golden light holding two giant arms, guiding lost souls back to their homes across the stars. When it finished, Herta looked at me again. She wanted to comment. I told her it was just a small, casual gesture. She scoffed, asking if I was done pretending to be a loyal follower. She asked if I didn't think my Aeon was great. I told her I didn't think so. I suggested that if anyone else had that kind of power, they might do an even better job. Herta shook her head. She admitted she'd overestimated my respect for my own god. I yawned and stretched, acting like the videos had bored me to sleep. I told them I was heading back. Herta didn't stop me. She said I was useless for anything other than causing trouble anyway. I waved a lazy goodbye and walked out. Ruanmei followed shortly after. Herta was confused. She thought they'd be more excited about the footage. Ruanmei offered a quick excuse about having other matters to attend to and requested we discuss the data later. Herta let her go, left alone in her office with stacks of reports and simulated universe data. Herta figured I was joking about the new Aeon. She suspected that if I actually had such heavy information, I'd demand something ridiculous for it, like her childhood records. She thought I was a strange guy, even by the standards of the Genius Society. Meanwhile, Ruanmei and I arrived at my private office. She stepped inside and locked the door behind her. I sat down and took a sip of tea. I asked her why she was locking the door, joking that I might have to scream for help. She didn't laugh. She asked to see the trophies. She wanted the proof. I told her we wouldn't be looking at them here. I stood up and snapped my fingers. The office dissolved. The walls blurred and vanished, replaced by a thick, swirling white mist. We weren't in my library. We were inside a palace. The architecture was impossible to pin down. One moment, it looked like the Xianzhou Alliance, the next a high-tech laboratory. It shifted between the void and reality, flickering like a broken film reel. Ruanmei stumbled, a wave of intense vertigo hitting her. I told her not to try and comprehend its true form. I told her to imagine an environment she was familiar with. She was no ordinary person. She focused her mind, and the chaos stabilized. The mist solidified into a laboratory filled with experimental equipment. It was her own research center. I explained that we were inside the sphere of light she'd seen in the video. This was where I created life. Here, the evolution of entire civilizations happened every second, birth, growth, evolution, and eventual extinction. The void she saw represented fallen civilizations. The return to reality meant a new cycle had begun. Some who had glimpsed this place called it the womb of life. I looked at her seriously. I told her that if she could overcome the madness of this place, she could gain knowledge that 1,000 experiments couldn't give her. But there was a catch. Her mind had to be strong enough not to explode from the information overload. I reminded her not to be greedy. In our cooperation, her life didn't just belong to her anymore. I told her to protect the part of her that belonged to me. She nodded. She understood. The rewards would come in stages, and her journey into the mysteries of creation had finally begun. I had ways to increase her mental endurance, but the time wasn't right yet. I didn't say another word. Instead, I snapped my fingers. The floor of the laboratory groaned and split open, revealing a dark void. A massive mechanical lift rose from the depths, carrying 2 severed arms, each over 10 feet long. These were the arms of Nanook. There were no scars on them from my blade. The skin was a deep, bruised bronze that still shimmered with a faint, dying radiance. Golden blood clung to the surface, frozen in time, no longer flowing but still humming with power. Ruanmei stared, completely entree-eyed. I had to speak to pull her back to reality. These are Nanook's arms, I said. I've suppressed their size for this environment. Can I touch them? She asked. The elegant genius was trying to maintain her composure, but I could see the hunger in her eyes. These limbs felt different from any life form she had ever encountered. They shared a tiny, flickering resonance with the energy she felt from me. She was looking at the literal flesh of an aeon. I shook my head slowly. You can't touch them directly. Not yet. These arms still hold the concept of destruction. They would incinerate your consciousness in an instant. But, she pressed, catching my drift. I held out my hand, an invitation. Place your hand on the back of mine. She understood. She stepped closer and gently rested her palm against the back of my hand. My skin felt peaceful to her, a stark contrast to the divine violence sitting in front of us. Together, we stepped toward the massive limbs. I reached out, using the hand she was touching, and pressed it firmly against Nanook's bronze skin. In an instant, a tide of violent, mad will erupted. It was like a caged beast suddenly snapping its chains, lunging straight for Ruanmei's mind. She froze. I felt her heart skip. In that split second, she realized she had made a terrible mistake. Against that crushing, chaotic will, she felt like a helpless child facing a god who could ignite a planet with a flick of a finger. She had no defense. The flames of destruction began to lick at her consciousness, ready to turn her world to ash. Then I moved. A soft, vibrant surge of life rose from my hand, wrapping around her mind like a protective cocoon. The searing heat of despair began to recede. The violent thoughts couldn't get near her. They crashed against my energy and shattered. Satisfied? I asked. My voice was calm, cutting through the mental noise. I pulled my hand away from the arm, and the crushing pressure vanished. Ruanmei stood there, trembling. She was drenched in a cold sweat, her body reacting instinctively to the brush with death. My dear assistant, I said, a small smile playing on my lips. Do you still doubt who I am? She took a breath, forcing her expression to remain neutral. At this point, do you really think I'm the type of person to be unreasonably stubborn? I chuckled. I think you're more like a little girl who stopped trusting people a long time ago and buried herself in science to hide. She didn't answer that. She looked back at the arms of the ruinous author. Are you really going to create an aeon? Not long ago, she was wondering how far she was from such a goal. Now, she was about to witness it. But even the aeon of life had never created another aeon. Could it actually work? I saw the doubt in her eyes. You think this is my first time trying? Isn't it? She asked. I've tried many times, I admitted. And I've failed many times. That's how I came up with this plan. This one has a 90% success rate. Before she could pepper me with more questions, I decided it was time to put her to work. Our foundation of trust was built. Now it needed a purpose. I have your first official task, I said. She shook her head, her hair swaying softly. I'm afraid my current knowledge isn't enough to help you build an aeon. She wanted to be part of it, but she knew her limits. She couldn't even touch the materials, let alone study them. This job doesn't require a deep understanding of life sciences, I told her. She looked at me suspiciously. Am I just pouring tea again? I want you to go into my library and collect some books, I explained. It's a record of countless lives. I could pull them myself, but doing it this way will expand your horizons. What kind of books? She asked. I smiled. Books about love, peace, and dreams. She needed to find them, but more importantly, I wanted her to understand them. Especially that first word, love. Ruanmei whispered the words back to herself, looking puzzled. Love, peace, and dreams. I can't guarantee the books I find will match what you're looking for. Those concepts are different for everyone. That's fine, I said. Collect them according to your own understanding. We have enough time, but not too much. A heavy, ancient-looking door phased into reality beside me. It was the entrance to the library. I turned the handle and held it open for her. Don't forget to come back to eat and rest, I added. If you want to go back to sleep now, I won't stop you. Before she stepped through, she turned to me one last time. I'm curious. Why did an Aeon like you choose to cooperate with me? I didn't give her a straight answer. I just smiled. Because being alive isn't just about a heart beating. It's about knowing others and being known. It's about engraving yourself into someone else's life. She didn't respond. She just stepped into the white mist of the library, lost in thought. As she walked through the endless shelves, she replayed everything that had happened. The first meeting, the collaboration, the way I pointed out her experimental flaws, and the terrifying touch of destruction. She knew I could have found the books in a second. She realized I was guiding her, like a teacher, using her curiosity as bait to lead her toward understanding human emotion. But she pushed those thoughts aside. She wanted to see the experiment. She wanted to see an Aeon born. She reached out, pulled an ancient volume from the shelf, and began her work. Back in the lab, I didn't go back to my office. I turned my full attention to Nanook's arms. Thanks to my previous research on the biological makeup of Aeons, this wouldn't be as slow as the first time. The timeline for this creation depended entirely on how fast I could deconstruct these limbs and find the base I needed. The library task was just a side project for Ruanmei. I needed her to understand those words before we took the next step. Time began to blur. And far away on the space station, a young man named Salus finally opened his eyes. Salus woke up and made a choice. He joined the crew of the Astral Express. He was a nameless now. It all went exactly as I expected. Himiko and the others decided to stay at the space station for a while. They needed to restock their supplies for the trailblazing journey ahead, and they planned to help with the repairs after the Legion's attack. Himiko also brought a curio that Herta was supposedly interested in, but Herta was late. Very late. When the puppet finally met Himiko at the platform, she grabbed the curio and hurried away. It was strange. Usually, a new curio was the highlight of her day, but something else had captured her attention. Himiko overheard the researchers whispering about the reason, but she didn't get the full story until she stepped back onto the Express. The Interastral Peace broadcast was playing. The mystery was about to be solved. Welcome to the Interastral Peace broadcast, the voice announced. This is an emergency bulletin. It is one of those rare moments where we bring you joyous news. We couldn't wait to share it. The report was urgent. At 0:53 system time, the Christie system was attacked by Nanook the Destruction and the Antimatter Legion. But there were no casualties. 7 different civilizations in that system witnessed the miracle. Just as the Aeon of Destruction arrived, before the Legion could even land, a mysterious figure appeared behind Nanook. With white wings and a long sword, he pierced the Aeon's chest. This mysterious figure, the broadcaster continued, is the Aeon of Life, who has recently entered public awareness. We are taking this chance to reveal his known image. The broadcast described the clash. The entire Antimatter Legion involved in the fight simply vanished. Nanook fled, but he left his arms behind. To top it off, the Aeon of Life personally guided everyone who had been lost or disconnected during the chaos back to their homes. A disaster that should have wiped out systems ended with 0 deaths. Himiko, Dan Hung, and Walt stood in the parlor car, listening intently. March 7th and the newly awakened Salus were still wandering the station, but the veterans were glued to the radio. Dan Hung was quiet, as usual. Himiko and Walt didn't miss a word. Walt adjusted his glasses, his mind racing. He kept thinking of one name, Yin. He knew from talking to Dan Hung that I wasn't present during the attack on the space station. Asta had even told them not to worry about my safety. Walt pushed his glasses up again, lost in thought. This was a miracle brought by life, the broadcast concluded. A historic humiliation for destruction. On behalf of the Interastral Peace Corporation, we offer our highest respect to this great deity. While my name echoed across the galaxy, I was still back at the station, buried in my research. I was busy deconstructing my trophies, Nanook's arms. This fight was just the beginning. The real wave I wanted to stir in the universe would happen when the new Aeon was born. Based on my past failures, I figured I might even finish before the Express set sail again. Time doesn't exist in the vacuum of space, but the system clock kept ticking. I left my lab to grab some breakfast from the station's cafeteria. I walked up to a door that seemed to stand in the middle of nowhere and knocked. "My dear assistant," I said, "time for a break." The fight with Nanook happened around 1 a.m. It was now 7 a.m. May had touched the essence of destruction earlier that morning, so I knew she wouldn't be able to sleep right away. I had sent her to organize the library to calm her nerves. Now, she needed real rest. The station was still a bit chaotic after the attack, but Asta's leadership was excellent. She already had the shifts back to normal. The door creaked open. May stepped out, looking as elegant as ever. Even after a sleepless night, she didn't look tired. Her green, jewel-like eyes were calm. I pulled out a chair for her at the desk. "Eat something," I told her. "Then get some sleep." "Thank you," she replied simply. She sat down. She knew her body needed the rest. Pushing herself now would only lead to mistakes. I watched her and smiled. Knowing I was an Aeon hadn't changed her attitude much. It had just built a bridge of trust. Maybe it was because I acted so casual. If I had met her in my true divine form first, she might have treated me differently. To her, an Aeon was just another form of life. To me, that was perfect. Most people can't act normal around a god. Even Herta was starting to suspect the truth, and I knew she wouldn't stay calm for long once she was certain. But that was fine. I wanted them to know. Only by being their Aeon could I truly read their lives and see every detail of their existence. "Stay here or go back to your room once you're done," I said. "I'm heading out." Deconstructing Nanook was important, but I didn't want to ignore Salus. He was like a newborn child in this world. Kafka had left him behind, so I couldn't just abandon him too. On my way back from the cafeteria, I saw him and March 7th working on some commission. I didn't bother them then, but I figured they'd be free now. Over in the master control zone, Salus was busy. He reached into a trash can and pulled out a small white dog. "Woof!" March 7th ran up, panting, and leaned over with her hands on her knees. "Peppy, you're way too fast. We finally caught you." She laughed, looking at the dog. "Why do you keep running into these tiny spots? You went right into the trash." Peppy was fast, and he could squeeze through gaps they had to run around. Salus looked at the trash that had been pulled out along with the dog. He handed Peppy to March. "Take him back first," Salus said. "I'll clean this up." "See you in a bit then," March said, cradling the dog. "What were you thinking, Peppy? You're filthy. I'll have to give you a bath. Asta is probably too busy, so I guess it's up to me." As March walked away, Salus knelt down to pick up the litter. Something caught his eye. It was a crumpled tissue with golden stains on it. The gold was brilliant. It looked familiar. He had seen that exact color right before he lost consciousness. The golden blood that had spilled from that white-haired man's chest was strange. Even after sitting in a trash can for hours, it didn't smell like rotting fruit or waste. It stained a simple tissue like brilliant gold paint. Salus stared at it, wondering if it was just pigment or something more. He reached down to pick it up. "Give that to me." A woman's voice came from behind him. Salus turned around. A petite girl with brown hair and purple eyes stood there, watching him. Her joints had visible seams. She wasn't human. He had seen these puppets all over the space station during the last few hours, but this was the first time one had actually spoken to him. March 7th had mentioned them before. These were Herta's puppets. The real Madame Herta only took control of them when she had business to attend to. Otherwise, they just stood there like statues. "I know you're thinking finders keepers, right?" The Herta puppet snapped before he could even open his mouth. She didn't wait for an answer. "I know you're the kid Himiko just picked up. Normally, I'd find you interesting, but I'm busy right now. I don't have time to argue. Herta acted like no one else existed. She pulled up a small floating screen and swiped through it. I don't have your account info, she said dismissively. I sent the credits to Himiko. Ask her for them. Consider it a labor fee for digging through the trash. I'm buying that thing. Hand it over. Salus hesitated for a second. He looked at the tissue, then at the puppet, and handed it over. Herta took it and walked away without a second glance. Taking that long to think. You're wasting my precious time, she grumbled as she disappeared. Salus's phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a message from Himiko. Herta, just send over some credits, Himiko wrote. Did you agree to join one of her experiments? I thought she was distracted by the battle from a few hours ago, but it looks like she's interested in you after all. No, Salus replied. I was cleaning up some trash. She just decided to buy a piece of it from me. The whole station belongs to her, Himiko messaged back. If she's buying trash from your hand, then it definitely wasn't trash. She must be very interested if she paid that quickly. Damn, Salus typed. Did I get ripped off? Herta is interested in many things that are useless or even dangerous to normal people, Himiko reassured him. You didn't lose out. In fact, looking at the amount she sent, you made a huge profit. I'll transfer the credits to you now. As he chatted with Himiko, Salus looked back at the floor. There were 2 more trash cans in front of him. Sure, 99% of what was inside was probably useless junk. But there was that tiny, lingering chance. There could be treasures hidden in the dark. He had promised Himiko he would become a nameless. Exploring the unknown was the core of Trailblaze. He had just earned a small fortune based on pure uncertainty. That money could buy gifts for March and the others. It could make them smile. It could buy things he liked. He locked his gaze onto the trash cans. Even if it was a waste of time, even if he got covered in filth, even if people stared at him with judgment, he didn't care. His fingers reached toward the dark opening of the bin with newfound determination. I had just activated my life coordinates to sense the area when I walked into the master control zone. I stopped dead in my tracks. A gray-haired girl was standing in front of 2 trash cans, surrounded by litter. Her slender fingers were inches away from diving into the bin. I felt a rare moment of genuine shock. What exactly had Kafka done to Salus's memory modules? Did this kid really have an obsession with trash? Wait, what are you doing? I asked. As his hidden guardian, I couldn't just let him dig through garbage and get covered in filth. Not unless it was some irreversible part of his nature. Salus spun around. He looked caught in the act. He gave me an awkward, sheepish smile. As the silence stretched, he looked at me with a sense of recognition. He stared into my eyes, sensing a warmth and a familiarity he couldn't quite place. He knew me, but he couldn't remember where from. Bai Yen, you're here. March 7th's voice rang out from behind me. I turned to see the pink-haired girl jogging over. I was just wondering what he was planning to do to that trash can, I said, tilting my head toward Salus. March looked at the mess on the floor and knelt down to help clean it up. Oh, Peppy jumped into the trash earlier, she explained. He dragged all this out when we pulled him out. Salus was just helping tidy up. I breathed a sigh of relief. Okay, he didn't have a weird hobby. I was overthinking it. Actually, well, it's nothing, Salus muttered. He seemed to be debating whether to tell us about Herta. He eventually decided against it. I could practically see the gears turning in his head. He looked at me like I was a competitor. If I started digging through the trash before him, the uncertainty would vanish. The meaning of Trailblaze would be ruined. March didn't notice the tension. She stuffed the last of the litter back into the bin and clapped the dust off her hands. All right, you 2 haven't met yet, right? Let me introduce you. This is Bai Yen. He's a researcher in life sciences. He's a really great guy and a good friend of ours. He even brought us a ton of gifts last time. She beamed at me before turning back to Salus. And this is Salus, our newest crew member on the Express. He actually saved my life today. I opened my mouth to speak, but March suddenly jumped. Oh, right. We still have that commission to finish. Come on, Salus, we're going to be late. I smiled to break the awkwardness. Go ahead. We can chat more next time. I watched them run off. Once they were gone, my smile faded. I felt like a lonely father being ignored by his kids. Everyone was busy. Everyone had things to do. Fine, I muttered. I'll just go back to deconstructing Nanook's arms. At least those two things won't run away from me. On the other side of the station, March and Salis finished their task. During a break, Salis turned to her. I feel like that man, Bayan. He has this strange aura. Like I can't help but trust him. Do you know why? March blinked, looking confused. Does he? I just thought he was easy to get along with. Salis realized quickly that March wasn't the type to have deep answers for things like that. He pulled out his phone and messaged Himiko. I met a man named Bayan, he wrote. Why do I feel this inexplicable sense of familiarity and closeness with him? We feel it too, Himiko replied. There's nothing wrong with him. We've known him for a while now, and he's a good person. As for the familiarity, it might just be his personality. A lot of people feel like they've known him forever the moment they meet him. He's a very approachable scholar. I see, Salis typed. If you get the chance, you should spend more time with him, Himiko added. Even without that aura you mentioned, his communication skills are top tier. On your journey, you'll meet all kinds of people. Learning how to talk to others from someone like him will be very useful. I figured I'd give it a shot the next time we met. Back in her office, Herta's puppet was busy. One hand held a piece of tissue stained with a faint golden residue, while the other swiped through floating screens, digging through security footage. She had seen the blood of Nanook, the Aeon of Destruction, once before. The moment she spotted those golden traces on the tissue, she knew exactly what she was looking at. It didn't take long. She pulled up a recording from the main control cabin's central walkway. On the screen, a young man with black hair and dark eyes stepped out of the elevator. The audio picked up a voice asking him what was on his face. I watched myself on the screen. In the video, I pulled out a tissue, wiped the golden smear from my cheek, and tossed it into the trash like it was nothing. Just some chocolate filling, I said with a laugh. Herta stared at the frozen frame. After spending so much time with me, she knew she wasn't mistaken. That was me. That was Bayan. But she didn't come find me immediately. Before this, she hadn't cared about my movements on the station at all. Now, everything had changed. She requested a file from Asta, the one sent to Wanmei earlier. It tracked my every move across the station, except for one place, my office. My office had no cameras. Even weirder, Herta discovered that all the programs in my wing were being monitored by a top-tier hacker. The style reminded her of that brat from the Stellaron Hunters, Silver Wolf, but it was subtly different. Herta usually didn't care about the Antimatter Legion attacking her station, but now she sensed a link between that Battle of the Gods and the raid. As the smartest human on Blue, member 83 of the Genius Society, she wasn't about to let the truth slip through her fingers. She pulled up the casualty reports Asta had filed. One detail jumped out. During the attack, the signals for both Wanmei and me had completely vanished. At the same time, my office door had been remotely deadlocked by that same hacker. Strange, she muttered. She looked at the timing of the battle on the platform where the Astral Express crew fought the Doomsday Beast. It ended at almost the exact moment the divine battle concluded. Then, shortly after, I reappeared on the station. The timing was too perfect to be a coincidence. Herta started crossing off the impossible. She was left with one bold, terrifying guess. If I really was who she thought I was, everything made sense. Taking Wanmei as an assistant. Claiming I could let her speak with life itself. My total lack of respect for the Aeon of Life. My lack of interest in the recordings of the battle. She even remembered a report from the IPC. The Aeon of Life often walked among mortals to observe and teach. That was why I knew every researcher on this station like the back of my hand. Meanwhile, back in my office, things were quiet. Wanmei's own lab had been trashed by the Legion, so I'd let her use my space. She was currently fast asleep on my folding bed. I poured myself a cup of tea, then walked over to her. This woman, a genius worshipped by scholars across the galaxy, looked peaceful when she slept. The only difference was that her beautiful green eyes were hidden behind closed lids. I knelt down and pulled the blanket up, tucking her in so she wouldn't catch a cold. As member 81 of the Genius Society, she was obsessed with life, but she didn't seem to care whose bed she was sleeping in. I didn't mind sharing. I'd already invited her to travel with me. The road ahead was long, and neither of us cared about the perceived intimacy of the situation. The doorbell rang. Wanmei was in a deep sleep and didn't stir. "Come in," I said without looking up. I adjusted the blanket one last time, covering her shoulders. The door slid open. Herta's puppet walked in and stopped dead when she saw us. Did I come at a bad time? She asked. No, your timing is actually perfect, I said, finally standing up. If you'd been any later, you wouldn't have found me at all. I wasn't joking. If she'd missed me, I would have already left for the sanctum of life. Without me to guide her, no one could find that place. And even for someone as brilliant as Herta, entering that realm unprepared would be a death sentence. Her mind would shatter before she could even grasp the rules of the environment. What do you need? I asked. If it's a long story, let's talk elsewhere. My assistant needs her rest. Fine, Herta agreed. We left Wanmei there and headed toward Herta's office. As we walked, Herta couldn't help herself. So, did you finally make a move on Wanmei? What do you mean by make a move? I asked. If you mean physical contact, then yes, many times. Herta rolled her eyes, thinking I was being vague again, but then I continued. The true meaning of certain contact is for the propagation of life. Those who do it just for pleasure might belong to the path of elation, but they certainly don't belong to life. Herta stared at me. Are you saying you're planning to have a child? You could put it that way, I replied honestly. But Wanmei can't help with that yet. For now, she can only watch. You two play a dangerous game, Herta muttered. You're misunderstanding, I laughed. I never said anything about that kind of act. Creating life isn't limited to natural reproduction. I decided to explain the joke so I wouldn't get a bad reputation. Even though I was teasing, I was telling the truth. In my plan to create an Aeon, Herta could actually be a huge help, even if she was just there to observe. Usually, Herta wouldn't bother walking me to her office. She'd just wait for me there in another puppet body. But today was different. She walked beside me the whole way. I noticed the change in her behavior, but I didn't say a word as we stepped inside. The office door slid shut behind us. I looked at Herta and smiled. Our little genius had clearly discovered something. I wasn't the type to beat around the bush, and neither was she. Herta reached into her puppet's storage compartment. She pulled out the tissue stained with my blood. She held it up like a trophy, her eyes fixed on me. I didn't expect my next meeting with the Aeon of Life to happen so suddenly, she said. Her voice was steady, or that I'd be this calm. Are you calm? I asked. I focused on her life signature. Even though her real body wasn't in the room, I could feel her excitement thrumming through the connection. Compared to the last time I encountered an Aeon, this is practically peaceful, Herta explained. Not many people can look a god in the eye. Even Madame Wanmei's spine would creak if she stood before Noose. I understood her point. That was exactly why I chose this form. I wanted to walk into their lives as a person first. If we spent enough time together, the barrier between mortal and God would vanish. Even if my identity was exposed, the bond would remain. I decided to lighten the mood. I forgot to mention earlier. When did our genius start digging through trash cans? I thought that tissue would be vaporized by the disposal system by now. Herta didn't blink. The kid with the stellaron in his chest found it. I went silent for a moment. Even as an Aeon, I hadn't expected the Trailblazer to have such unique hobbies. I cleared my throat to keep the conversation moving. You aren't actually certain of my identity, I pointed out. You're just guessing. You pulled out that tissue to bluff me. But at this point, there's no reason to hide it. Do you want to meet officially? As the Aeon? Herta looked at me, her resolve hardening. Yes, I can do that, I said with a smile. But there is a price. Herta braced herself. She knew the world didn't give anything for free, especially not from a god. She was ready to offer anything. Honestly, with my power, I could have taken whatever I wanted from her without asking. But I respected mortals. That was what made me me. What do you think I want from you? I asked. Can't you just take it? She countered. I shook my head slowly. You're wrong. There is one thing that pure power cannot obtain. What is it? I want to share the afternoon sun with Madame Herta, I said. I want to chat about the rumors of the galaxy. I want to walk through a mall and pick out gifts together. I want to exchange blessings when the new year arrives. I want to share a meal and laugh. I watched her expression soften as I finished. What I want is Madame Herta's genuine friendship. She didn't answer immediately, so I continued. You're interested in me as an Aeon. I'm just as interested in you as a form of life. I want to read every page of your story. In return, you can learn everything you want about me. I offered the invitation again. So, Do you want to be friends with a god? It sounded heavy, but many people had already accepted that invitation without realizing it. Suddenly, a data screen flickered to life in front of me. The signal stabilized, and a video call began. The woman on the screen looked like the puppet, but she was older and far more elegant. This was the real Herta. The negotiation was over. I have to admit, the real Herta said, a smile playing on her lips. That is an incredibly interesting proposal. I accept. I looked at her image. Her face was beautiful, her features sharp and deep, her skin as white as snow. I wasn't wrong. You really are as beautiful as a newborn larvae. Herta's smile twitched. I know both are beautiful in your eyes, but I hate that comparison. You want to roll your eyes at me, don't you? I laughed. Why hold back? There's no hierarchy here. We're friends now, right? Since we're friends, Herta replied. I suppose I can take a joke. It's not like your words can actually hurt me. I like that answer, I said. Let me try again. Madam Herta, you are as stunning as a Dryla, the aeon of beauty. Herta kept her smile, but she shook her head. Let's keep that between us. I don't want a bunch of nights of beauty ruining my schedule by hunting me down. Fair point, I admitted. I actually met a knight named Arjani once. I used the same comparison on him because I forgot who he was for a second. I remembered the encounter clearly. It was shortly after I arrived in this world. Arjani had started praising my beauty the moment we met. I was trying to remember his name from the game I used to play, so I politely returned the compliment. I told him he was as beautiful as a Dryla. What happened next? Herta asked, leaning in. He challenged me to a duel, I said. He told me that if I lost, I had to admit a Dryla's beauty was peerless and unrivaled. I shrugged. So, I had to beat him up. I apologized for the comparison, but I refused to admit anyone was peerless. After that, I kept running into him across the universe. He wouldn't give up. Every time we met, I had to beat him up again. I sighed. I hope he can last a few more rounds next time. I was already holding back. It felt good to talk like this. I hadn't shared stories about my travels as an Aeon in a long time. If I told the researchers, they wouldn't believe me. My old friend Aha would listen, but I didn't feel like talking to him. I had enough history with that madman already. I treated the stories of my travels like bedtime tales for Herta and Ruanmei. It was rare to have a conversation like this between friends, and I found myself actually enjoying it. You're only listening because you're interested in Ian's, I teased Herta's puppet. I've been telling you about the experiences of the Aeon of life. If I changed the protagonist to just some ordinary guy, would you still care? No, Herta answered bluntly. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. Instead, she pivoted to the topic she really cared about. What did you mean earlier when you said a new Aeon would be born soon? Looking back at our conversation on the way from my office to the lab, I could tell Herta had already guessed most of it. She just wanted me to confirm her suspicions. I wasn't going to give her a detailed lecture. I just smiled. Exactly what I said. Literally. One of the perks of talking to a genius is that you don't have to over-explain things. Herta went quiet for a moment, then asked another question. When can we meet in person? Let's find a time later, I replied. We can have some tea, eat some sweets, and enjoy the stars. You know, like normal friends. After saying my goodbyes, I left Herta's office and headed toward the life department to get some actual work done. Meanwhile, light years away, the real Herta sat at her desk and whispered to herself. Like normal friends? Is that what he thinks? She knew the friendship and promises of an Aeon weren't things to be taken lightly. A moment later, in the main control cabin of the space station, Asta received a message. It was a question she never expected to hear from Madam Herta. Herta, what is the normal way for friends to interact? Asta stared at the screen, her brow furrowed. She was convinced Madam Herta's account had been hacked. There was no other explanation. 72 system hours passed. The Herta space station had finally returned to its usual order. Most of the equipment damaged in the Legion's attack had been repaired or replaced. It cost a fortune, mostly Asta's private funds, though the massive pile of credits I had contributed helped soften the blow. Ruanmei had spent almost the entire time locked in my office. I, on the other hand, hadn't stayed put. When I wasn't busy deconstructing the concept of destruction, I was observing my curios or just wandering around, chatting with everyone. Lately, the entire universe was talking about the Christie system, the place where life and destruction had clashed. Between the Interastral Peace Corporation's marketing and the sheer scale of the event, everyone knew about it. Pilgrims from civilizations that worshipped the Aeon of Life flocked to the system. The locals were braced for a chaotic surge in tourism, but the pilgrims were surprisingly polite. They took some photos, left gifts of condolence for the victims, and moved on. Their reason? They didn't want to cause trouble or ruin their father's reputation. Hearing that news made me feel conflicted. I was proud of how sensible my children were, but their fanaticism gave me a headache. I wished they'd spend that travel money on local snacks instead of chasing my footsteps. If I ever officially ordered them to stop following me, the collective wail from the life coordinates across the galaxy would probably drown me in sorrow. Aside from the pilgrims, I'd spent the last 3 days looking after Stell. Since Himiko had asked me to keep an eye on her, and since Stell already felt a natural affinity toward me, we became close friends very quickly. She even asked me for advice on how to talk to people. I didn't hold back. I taught her everything I knew. When I walked into the Astral Express's parlor car again, March 7th's voice nearly shattered my eardrums. Bai Yen, what on earth did you tell Stell? Why is she acting like this? Pom-Pom was busy mopping in the next car, and the others were away on errands. Stell was out doing commissions for the station. March 7th was the only one there to confront me. What's wrong? I asked, genuinely confused. She's been saying the weirdest things lately. March 7th paced back and forth. Like, earlier, I told her to say something, and she just looked at me and said the word something. Literally. I remembered that lesson. I was teaching her how to be humorous in conversation. You know, keeping things light. And I sighed. She's a natural talent, but she's learning backwards. Right now, she's mastered the humor part, but she hasn't quite figured out the appropriate part yet. March 7th wasn't done. And what about the way she's handling commissions? She used to just help out, but now she's obsessed with the rewards. She's been asking me about everyone's birthdays, their hobbies, and exactly how many credits it costs to resupply the Express every time we dock. What is she planning? I laughed. The girl cares about her family, March. A birthday gift doesn't cost much, but keeping this train running does. She knows she has a lot of credits from Herta, but she also knows money doesn't last forever if you don't work for it. March 7th blinked, the realization finally hitting her. Oh, I guess that makes sense. We sat down on the sofa, and she handed me a glass of juice. What else did you tell her? I told her that mutual respect is vital in communication, I said, taking a sip. And I taught her what to do when someone doesn't respect her. Try to earn their respect? March suggested. Of course not. If they don't respect you, you don't need to respect them. It's a simple rule. I see. March 7th looked at me thoughtfully. Stell said Himiko was the one who suggested she learn from you. Why didn't Himiko let me learn from you? I mean, Danheng doesn't like talking, so I get why he didn't go, but we've known each other for a while now. I looked at her, seeing the genuine confusion in her eyes. Probably because you're already too cute for your own good. March 7th huffed, crossing her arms. What do you mean sometimes? I'm always cute. I couldn't help but smile. You're right. My mistake. Anyway, March said, suddenly remembering something. I asked if you wanted to travel with us, and you kept saying the time wasn't right. So, when is it going to be right? I looked out at the stars. Soon. Very soon. The Interastral Peace Corporation had released a few snippets of footage, and the clash between life and destruction was already the hottest topic in the galaxy. Praise for me poured in from every corner of the universe. I was used to it. Usually, the admiration from my children was enough to make my ears ring, so this was nothing new. 6 days had passed since that collision. I had already extracted what I wanted from the arms of destruction, the deep underlying essence of its power. The process of melting the chocolate was finished. I had to thank Akivali, Lon, and Yaoshur. If I hadn't already deconstructed their divine life structures as fellow Eons, melting this power wouldn't have been this simple or fast. I pushed open the ancient, simple doors of the primordial land of life and stepped into my library. 6 days wasn't nearly enough time to read through even the first floor. Ruan Mei hadn't even found the boundary of the first level yet. I saw her standing before a bookshelf, cradling a volume in her hands. She was so focused she didn't even notice me walking up. Ever since she confirmed my identity as an Aeon, Her hunger for this knowledge had grown insatiable, but she hadn't forgotten her new job as my assistant. "How is it going?" I asked, pulling her back from the ocean of knowledge. She looked up, her crystalline green eyes meeting mine. "I have organized 32 books on dreams, 23 on peace, and 5 on love. They are all on the designated shelves. What reward do you want?" I asked. Screening 10 books a day and fully verifying their contents was hard work. She was trying her best. "I want to observe your process of creating life," she said. "I am curious how it differs from my usual experiments." She knew it was too early to ask me for the ultimate answers to the essence of life, so she settled for this. "No problem," I agreed easily. "But you might be disappointed. You won't be able to see the true process of God-making." Her brow furrowed. It was the first time her calm, elegant face had shown such a big reaction. "In the primordial land, the process will be masked by your own perception," I explained. "You can't see things outside your own cognitive boundaries here. But that process will merge into this land as information. Once you understand the life structure of an aeon, you'll see the truth." Her expression softened slightly, but she still looked a bit troubled. "Don't be sad," I added. "Besides, we might get to meet the Aeon of Remembrance this time. Don't you want to see fully?" Fully recorded everything in the universe. When something truly earth-shattering happened, his figure would manifest in the stars to witness the moment. A new Aeon being born at the hands of another was definitely enough to make him show up. May stopped frowning and gave a small smile. "Compared to memories I can only look at from afar, I still prefer life I can touch." I laughed. "I'm glad you think so. I'm not good at flattery, but if you like that, I'm happy. Keep reading. Tomorrow, I start the demonstration." I walked over to the shelves to check her work. Most were about dreams and peace, concepts that weren't as vague as love. The 5 books she chose regarding love were all about parents and children. Even though she had lost her mother young and the concept of love was blurred to her, she still remembered the taste of it from back then. 60 books weren't enough, but I only gave her the task so she could understand the concepts better. If I needed more, I could pull them all from the library instantly. Tomorrow would be the 7th day since the space station was attacked. It was the day I would officially begin. The Astral Express crew had stayed for a week, and as the repairs finished, they would soon depart for a new journey. The universe was about to welcome a brand new day and a brand new Aeon. Humans have an infancy, but an Aeon is born with majesty and power. The next morning, the researchers at the station noticed I was missing. Usually, I brought breakfast for May, but I was nowhere to be found. I was back in the primordial land. May stood quietly in a laboratory environment created by her own consciousness, watching the masked version of my creation process. Even if it was filtered through her understanding, it was still a dreamlike, grand spectacle. In her vision, colorful spiral genes danced in the air. The laboratory expanded until the boundaries vanished. Books flew out from the ancient doors like schools of fish, swirling around the glowing genes. Suddenly, a clear piano note rang out. I sat at a piano in the center of the void, my fingers dancing across the black and white keys. A book fell from the air and landed on the music stand. The pages flipped as if stirred by a breeze. My fingers moved faster, playing the life contained within that book into a melody. I leaned forward, pouring every bit of focus into the rhythm. The spiral genes began to blur and change shape. A vivid image appeared in the air, a mother telling a bedtime story to a sleepless child, her voice the gentlest sound in the world. As the wind flipped to the last page, that book flew away, and another took its place. The melody shifted instantly. It became sharp, tragic, and heroic. A bloodstained knight appeared in the projection, swinging a broken sword to keep monsters away from his home. I played on, turning the essence of these lives into a song of creation. The melody smoothed out the moment the knight defeated his final foe. One book drifted away, and another fell onto the music stand. A new, vivid scene burst into May's vision. I watched her through the corner of my eye as she stared, mesmerized. In the projection, a little girl who had lost both her arms held a paintbrush in her teeth. She was painting a sea of vibrant, colorful flowers onto a canvas. There was a hint of regret in this melody, but it was overwhelmed by a continuous, clear tone that stretched toward a distant future. Book after book fell and departed. The melody of life cycled and swirled, tugging at the heartstrings. Even the most ordinary life, when played this way, was enough to move the soul. Ruanmei looked lost in it. She had forgotten about time. Then, I kicked the piano into a violent gear. The shift was like a physical blow to the ears. The scenes of love, peace, and dreams vanished. Now, a sharp, lonely figure flickered through a sky swarming with a tide of insects. Even with his skill, there was only despair against such numbers. Yet, the figure never stopped attacking. It was madness. It was courage. Ruanmei recognized him. The man looked almost exactly like Nanook, the Aeon of Destruction, but without a trace of divinity. This was Nanook before he had ascended. The violent tone grew more passionate. Nanook's silhouette began to overlap with the knights and warriors from the previous songs. A melody called Courage rang out through the primordial land. The clanging, metallic notes echoed as the mortal Nanook launched attack after attack against the swarm. He didn't tire. He didn't flinch. Time seemed to stretch for years and then snap back in an instant. Suddenly, the countless figures who had fought for peace appeared beside him in the projection. They raised their weapons and roared at the disaster looking down on them. Ruanmei watched silently as this epic unfolded. People, driven by grief and rage, rose from despair to stage their final resistance. Some died, but no one retreated. They wanted to dismantle the disaster, and they weren't afraid of their own destruction in the process. The melody of courage shifted into resistance. Was this a concept I had extracted from the depths of destruction, or was it something I had blended using beauty as a base? Ruanmei couldn't tell. Suddenly, the piano stopped. The epic scenes faded. For a second, she thought something had gone wrong with the creation process. But then, the melody of resistance and courage rose again. I closed my eyes, my shoulders swaying with the rhythm. I leaned forward and began to hum. Ruanmei realized it wasn't just one song. I was humming the collective voice of all living beings. The scenes of love, peace, and dreams returned, but this time, the people had won. They were cheering. They were leaping for joy. In the real world, the planets destroyed by the swarm never saw such a sight. But here, I was using special means to condense a dream of victory bought with courage. My fingers danced across the keys like white jade. The essence of all things began to converge. The blurry genetic concepts floating in the air rushed toward a single point. A new life was being born. Strands of hair, white as a waterfall, began to burn like flames, the symbol of unyielding courage. A glowing, sharp longsword materialized in her hands to give strength to her resistance. The girl's delicate face became solid. I felt a smile tug at my lips. It was time for the finale. "I'll call you Hope," I whispered. The concepts scattered across the universe snapped together in the wake of the melody. The girl slowly opened her eyes. Her golden pupils flashed with determination, tempered by a touch of tenderness and a longing for the future. Ruanmei burned this image into her memory. She felt a pang of regret that she couldn't witness the true, unfiltered process of God-making yet, but she knew that as our cooperation deepened, she would. She wondered if one day she would stop being a spectator and play the movement of life alongside me. Or perhaps, how long it would take for her to play such a world-shaking piece on her own. Even as a world-renowned expert, she felt like a beginner in front of me. The final note of the melody faded into silence. The girl landed softly. White flames flickered over her body, forming an exquisite evening gown that wrapped around her figure. She gripped her sword. The hem of her skirt curled like dancing fire snakes. Her waterfall of white hair shimmered, the ends glowing like embers. Her golden eyes were as bright as the sun, yet soft as the moon. She looked around blankly, unaffected by the shifting environment. Finally, her gaze locked onto me. A sense of familiarity, closeness, and a deep bond flooded her mind. A single word surfaced in her consciousness. "Father." I looked at her and gave her a gentle smile. "My dear child," I said, my voice clear. "You were born from the beautiful prayers of all living beings." I walked toward her. To her, my silhouette seemed towering and magnificent. "You possess the courage to face the future and the power to resist suffering." You will lead people to turn their sweet dreams into reality. Your consciousness is the collective will of the masses, steered by the concept of hope, sailing toward a future neither of us can know. I reached her and placed my hand on her head, stroking her hair. She didn't pull away. A warm, gentle feeling filled her heart. Your body has a foundation from the aeon of destruction, I continued, kneeling so I could look her in the eye. In a way, he is also one of your creators. But, I paused, my gaze turning serious. When your creator stands in the way of the beautiful prayers of the people and tries to destroy the path to their dreams, what will you do? The girl didn't hesitate. I will swing my sword at him, she replied firmly, even if I am shattered to pieces. Very good, my dear child. I hope the hand that holds your conviction remains as steady as your answer. I stood back up. People call beings who hold power over paths and embody high philosophical concepts eons. You are one of them now, but you are different from the rest. She looked at me, her eyes filled with confusion. I smiled at the girl and gave her a final piece of advice. I told her that she would always have a harbor called home, and I would be there waiting to clear her doubts. While her wings were still growing, I promised to offer her my protection. But once she was ready to fly, she would be free to soar and write her own life story. I didn't want her to become a coward who couldn't stand on her own, nor did I want her to perish before she even learned to flap her wings. Remember your answer from before, I said, my voice steady. If the day comes where I stand on the opposite side of life itself, you must have the courage to swing your sword at me. Likewise, if you ever fall into the abyss, I will bury you with the heaviest of hearts. The girl looked at me with a serious expression. She nodded, promising to keep my teachings in her heart. I told her that hope was the path she now commanded, and that would be how the world knew her. But she needed a real name. I thought about it for a moment, weighing the options carefully. Since you will give people the strength to fly, how about the name Siyu? I asked. She smiled and told me she loved it. I patted her head and told her it was time to say hello to our guests. We couldn't keep being rude by ignoring them. The aunt and uncle, I was referring to were Wanmei, who was standing right there, and Fuli, the aeon of remembrance, who was watching us from the depths of the primordial land of life. I took Siyu's hand and led her toward Wanmei, completely ignoring the aeon behind us. Siyu placed a hand on her chest and bowed politely. Hello, Auntie, she said. Wanmei was staring at 3 eons at once, fully outside the window, and life and hope standing right in front of her. Even for someone like her, it was hard to stay calm after witnessing the birth of a god. She focused her attention on the young girl and offered a small, rare smile. I turned Siyu around to face Fuli. The aeon of remembrance looked like a statue carved from crystal, his features blurred and indistinct under a crown of hanging beads. Siyu frowned slightly, looking confused. She tugged at my hand and whispered, Father, should I call him uncle or auntie? I laughed. Whatever you like. Fuli spoke then. His voice was like a distant ship crossing a vast ocean, or the sound of rain nourishing a dream. Every word he spoke felt connected, like a rhythmic chant about destiny and the turning of a new musical movement. I smiled at him like he was an old friend. You're still talking like that, I joked. Would it kill you to be normal for once? I used my power to let the branches of life expand through the void, pushing back against the weight of the stars. I sighed, realizing there weren't many eons you could actually have a conversation with. I told him I missed Akivali. As soon as I said that name, Fuli's figure vanished instantly. It was as if he was saying, if I'm not welcome, I'm leaving. I knew Fuli didn't actually think like that. The aeon of remembrance simply appeared and disappeared without warning, existing only where memories were being engraved into the universe. We weren't actually in deep space. The primordial land of life was a transparent sphere held in my hand, essentially my own private storage dimension. We were still technically at the Herta space station. Fuli had been watching us from just outside the station's perimeter. Across the station, researchers were crowding the observation decks, staring at the spot where the aeon had just vanished. Somewhere else in the universe, Herta herself was watching the live recordings. She was shaking with excitement. She whispered to herself, wondering what her aeon friend had just done. She realized I had actually succeeded. I stood in the primordial land and created a door for Siyu. It was a gate for her to leave this place and embrace the universe. She wasn't a child who would stay by my side. She was a beacon of hope who needed to bring courage to those who were suffering. Before she left, I rubbed her head one last time. I told her if she ever ran into trouble, she shouldn't be too shy to tell me. To the world, she was a magnificent god. To me, she was just my daughter. I opened the door. Siyu took one last look at me and stepped through with firm, determined strides. Once she was gone, I turned to Wanmei. She looked deep in thought. I asked her what was on her mind. I'm wondering when I'll truly be able to see that God-making process for myself, she said, her voice back to its usual calm. That's a very you thing to focus on, I replied. I asked her if she thought of me as a book. She said I was like a single floor of a massive library. When she asked how many floors there were, I just told her to guess. I held out my hand to her. Don't worry about that now. You'll find out eventually. It's been a while since we held hands, hasn't it? Are you coming? Wanmei reached out, her gloved fingers resting in my palm. We walked through the ancient-looking door together. The environment shifted, and we were back in my office. Everything looked normal, as if nothing had happened, but I knew the universe was about to change forever. I stretched my arms and let out a long yawn. I'm hungry, I admitted. I want some plum blossom cake. Wanmei stared at me. Sometimes I suspect you only invite me along so you can eat sweets. I picked up a piece of cake she had left on the desk and grinned. Maybe. I stuffed it into my mouth, my cheeks bulging as I smiled at her. Suddenly, my phone buzzed on the desk. It was a video call from Herta. I tapped the screen, and her familiar face projected into the air. She looked at me, an Aeon sitting there chewing on a snack, and asked if I had succeeded. I swallowed the cake and took a sip of tea to wash it down. You saw it yourself, didn't you? Do you think Fully would have shown up if I failed? Herta asked about the new Aeon with surprising politeness. I teased her about it, saying I expected her to be more blunt. She insisted this was how she treated friends. I told her I appreciated the friendship, but she should relax a bit. You don't need me to tell you much about that child, I said with a confident smile. Her existence won't be quiet like nihility. You're going to see a light that reflects across the entire cosmos. Herta didn't push for more details. Instead, she asked what the new Aeon called me. When I told her she called me Father, Herta went quiet. She asked if I was trying to build my own mythology, with me sitting as the father god at the top of a divine pantheon. I shook my head. Of course not. If a system forms, it'll just be a coincidence. I'm just a father who's going to be very busy looking after his children. I wasn't trying to be a high and mighty father god. Herta brought the conversation back to her main point. She couldn't hide her curiosity. She asked me when she would finally see that light I promised, the one that would reflect across the entire universe. I told her it might take a few system hours, or it might happen in the very next second. Far away, Jarilo 6 sat frozen in the dark. It was a planet buried under ice and snow. 700 years ago, the Antimatter Legion had set this world ablaze. They turned a lush, green paradise into a landscape of destructive fireworks. Then, a Stellaron responded to the people's desperate prayers. An eternal freeze swept through, consuming the invaders and the defenders alike. Only one lonely city remained standing, Belobog. Even now, the Fragmentum, the cancer of all worlds, was eating away at their last bit of living space. The city was split between the overworld and the underworld, a divide that tore at the people's hope. The power of preservation was the only thing keeping Belobog alive, but the miracles were fading. The divine protection felt shaky, like it was about to collapse. Simply holding the line wasn't enough to stop the Fragmentum's encroachment. This tiny civilization was backed into a corner with nowhere left to run. Without a miracle, they were destined to lose everything. Their civilization would vanish into the cold. Cocolia, the leader of this dying world, could see the despair clearly. Unlike her people who lived for the moment, she saw the end approaching. There were no solutions. There was no hope. The weight of every life and the entire future of her people rested solely on her shoulders. Inside Clippeth Fort, Cocolia sat at her desk, processing documents as she always did. Her eyes were dull and lifeless. To her people, the word future was just a hollow sound. Even if they had resources, the freeze was never-ending. Their world was shrinking from a small territory to a single cramped room. For Belobog, The future was already out of reach. Cocolia knew her successor would likely spend their entire life in this same despair. Suddenly, a sweet female voice whispered in her ear, "Great guardian of the end, do you need courage?" A pure, white flame seemed to rise from the depths of Cocolia's heart. "Do you need power?" the voice asked. Cocolia was certain this didn't come from the Stellaron. "Do you want to raise your weapon and light the fire of hope for your civilization?" The voice was soothing but firm. "Do not despair. I will give you the courage to light the flame. Do not just hold the line. I will grant you the power to blaze a path toward the future. I will guide you toward your dreams. Together, we will bring hope to this cold world." Back at the Herta space station, I was relaxing in my office. I snacked on the plum blossom cakes Ruan May had just finished making. Between bites, I played a round of games with Silver Wolf. Ruan May poured a cup of tea for herself and one for me. She asked what my next move was. I put my phone down and smiled. I told her I wanted to follow those nameless trailblazers and see the world. It wasn't just Belobog. Across the stars, more and more people were hearing that sweet, dreamlike voice. A white flame ignited in their hearts, and a soft, warm power flowed through their bodies. The first group of people touched by this light of hope began to emerge. They had no idea which Aeon was watching them. This new power had the sturdiness of preservation, but it felt much more intimate. Even in the wild, primitive corners of the galaxy where people didn't even know what an Aeon was, the blessing arrived. They began to praise the deity who granted them courage and strength. Even those who were ready to give up in the face of disaster felt the spark. As long as there was a tiny shred of prayer in their hearts, that deity ignited it with the fire of courage. An invisible hand was leading the lost back to the path of the future. The white flame chased away the darkness. It wasn't in one specific place, yet it felt like it was always there, walking beside them. It appeared to wake the courage hidden in their souls. It appeared to give them the strength to carve out a new destiny. This deity was working silently, lighting up the world without even announcing its name. But as the light began to reflect across the cosmos, an image of the deity formed in the people's minds. They began to call out a name, Hope. I rested for a moment longer, then stood up and led Ruan May out of the office. We walked toward the platform in the support zone where the Astral Express was docked. Only 10 minutes had passed since the departure. Even if my daughter, CU, had caused a massive stir out there, the news wouldn't have reached the station yet. As we walked, researchers passed us by. Some greeted me and Ruan May, and I made sure to respond cheerfully. Other staff members were whispering, huddled in groups, wondering what was going on. They were still buzzing about the Aeon of Remembrance appearing out of nowhere. They wondered if Madame Herta had pulled off some grand experiment. I just kept walking, a small smile on my lips, knowing the real show was only just beginning. The researchers in the hallway were still buzzing with theories. Some thought the Aeon of Remembrance appearing was linked to Madame Herta's secret experiments. Others whispered that it might be Ruan May's doing. Ruan May denied it immediately. That shifted everyone's suspicion back to Herta. Herta, in her typical arrogant fashion, released a statement saying she had nothing to do with it. She wasn't the type to pad her resume with fake achievements. Even if she tried to deflect the credit, nobody would ever suspect me, the true source. I led Ruan May to the Astral Express and knocked on the door of the parlor car. March 7th opened it. She looked a little annoyed. She asked if I was looking for Stell again and told me they were set to sail tomorrow. She said Himiko and Stell were busy checking supplies. I gave her a playful smile. I asked if I couldn't just be there to see her. She blushed and stuttered for a second before rolling her eyes and letting us in. She was getting used to my jokes, especially since Stell had started picking up my habits. The interior of the Express hadn't changed much. It looked almost exactly as it did thousands of years ago when I traveled with Akivali to study the train's construction. That felt like a lifetime ago. Now, only March 7th and Welt were inside. Welt was busy scrolling through news on his phone. Pom-Pom, the adorable conductor, was scurrying around with a small mop. The rabbit-like creature saw us, grumbled about waiting until we left to finish cleaning, and turned to walk away. I reached out and patted Pom-Pom's shoulder. I told the conductor we weren't leaving. Pom-Pom looked up, confused. Walt put down his phone and helped me out. He told Pom-Pom that it was exactly what it sounded like. He mentioned how Pom Pom had wanted me to travel with them for a long time anyway. I stood up and made it official. I told them I wanted to travel with them for a while, and I wanted to bring my friend along too. March 7th's face lit up instantly. She was thrilled. Walt remained calm, as usual. He looked at the elegant woman beside me and asked if my friend was indeed Ruan-mei. News travels fast on the space station. They had all heard that a big shot from the Genius Society was visiting, and they'd probably heard the gossip about us too. March 7th mentioned how incredible the Aeon of Remembrance was and looked at Ruan-mei for answers. Ruan-mei and I exchanged a quick look. She calmly told them she had no way of making an Aeon appear and suggested they look for clues elsewhere. Welt analyzed the situation. He noted that the appearance of remembrance usually meant a major cosmic event was happening, yet the station seemed too peaceful. March 7th wondered if the Aeon was just late or got lost, considering the recent chaos with life and destruction. Suddenly, the door to the next carriage opened. Stell walked in. She deadpanned that the Aeon wasn't March, so he probably wouldn't get lost while being late. March took it as a compliment on her cute and ditzy nature, but told Stell not to expect forgiveness just for calling her cute. I jumped in, asking March if she was finally admitting she was a beautiful girl. She huffed, asking if I thought otherwise. I just laughed and agreed. Himiko walked in behind Stell with a complicated expression. I think she was starting to regret suggesting that Stell learn from me. Stell's banter was definitely becoming more like mine. Still, it made the atmosphere lively. With March and Stell around, even a trip to the most desolate corner of the universe would be fun. Walt got back to business. He told Himiko that Ruan-mei and I wanted to join the journey. Himiko smiled and welcomed us warmly. March 7th checked her phone and reported that Dan Hung didn't have any objections either. Pom Pom stood there, holding the little mop, and protested that nobody had asked the conductor's opinion. I knelt down to look Pom Pom in the eye. I asked if the conductor would welcome us. My sincere gaze made the little rabbit shy. Pom Pom eventually agreed, but only if I promised to make donuts and breakfast. I stood up and looked at Himiko, the one truly in charge. She asked if we needed time to prepare. She offered to delay their departure if necessary. I told her I was ready. Ruan-mei tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and said she didn't need time either. She did warn me that I'd need to bring plenty of ingredients for plum cake. She reminded me that even a skilled cook can't make something out of nothing. I told her not to worry. I had prepared more than enough rice for her, along with other generous rewards. March 7th tilted her head, curious about what rewards I meant. I reached out and pinched her cheek. I told her it was this kind of reward. She swiped my hand away and pouted, asking how that was a reward. I just chuckled. For some people, it definitely was. Himiko frowned slightly, looking at us like she smelled something a bit scandalous. The vote was unanimous. Himiko arranged rooms for us and told us we could decorate them however we liked. Ruan-mei finished with her room quickly and came straight to mine. I was sitting by the window, staring out at the stars, feeling a bit nostalgic. I told her this was my second room on the Astral Express. She sat at my desk and started flipping through my research notes. She asked what happened to my first room. I told her a jerk blew it up. She offered a soft, emotionless apology for my former leader. If anyone else had said it, I might have believed they cared. Ruan-mei found it hard to believe. The Aeon who had just sent ripples through the entire universe was sitting right there, casually reminiscing about the past like an old friend. Ever since the Aeon of Elation, figured out my ability to track life coordinates, he started playing a massive game of hide-and-seek with me. The last time I caught him, I managed to snatch something from him as compensation for blowing up my room. I focused my energy. Crimson particles condensed at my fingertips until a heavy, vibrant red mask appeared. It had a wild, arrogant grin, yet there was something strangely restrained about it. This wasn't a standard mask used by the masked fools. It didn't need their certification. This was a mask taken directly from the body of the Aeon of Elation himself, given to a friend. Suddenly, the mask flickered with a faint light. A voice erupted from it, laughing like a madman. "Old friend, you finally decided to call me. I've been waiting so long." Ruan-mei, who had been focused on my notes, felt a sudden chill. That laughter had a contagious, psychotic edge to it. I felt a soft wave of life energy wrap around her, shielding her consciousness from the influence. She didn't look back or speak. She knew better. Getting the attention of the Aeon of elation never led to anything good. I smiled, my expression much more reserved than the mask's. I told him I just brought the mask out for a second. I pointed out that he was the one who called me, sounding as impatient as a bitter ex-wife. That's not important, the voice shouted. Guess what I'm doing? If you guess right, there's a punishment. If you guess wrong, there's a reward. I didn't play his game. I asked him if he had found Nanook yet. I found him. Aha laughed. He looked so pathetic and stubborn. It was hilarious. But it turns out he's completely broke, right? Aha loved that description. The frantic laughter stopped abruptly, replaced by a fake, grieving tone. He complained that I wasn't being a good friend because I didn't invite him to join in on the fun. I reminded him that blowing up my room wasn't exactly a friendly move either. You're still so petty. Aha sighed, dropping the act. I told him Nanook wasn't petty and suggested he go bother him instead. True. Aha laughed again, then his tone shifted. Did you really pierce his heart? I picked up a cup of tea with my free hand and took a sip. I asked him if it even mattered. It doesn't, he chirped. I'll find a way to patch the hole for him. Maybe I'll use those posters of you to plug it up. Think of it like putting a wrapper on a piece of filled chocolate so the filling doesn't leak everywhere. The mouth on the mask stretched into an even more exaggerated, debauched grin. Luckily, Wan Mei had incredible composure. She kept reading my notes calmly, listening to Tu Ian's joke about a third. Anyone else would have probably lost their mind. A short and pleasant reunion, my old friend, Aha's voice echoed. But I have things to do. I wasn't going to let him off that easily. I exposed him right then and there. I reminded him that he only left the space station 7 days ago to find Nanook. Before that, he had spent over 6 months disguised as an ordinary staff member just to hang out with me. Strange, the mask whispered. I clearly masked my coordinates. My disguise was perfect. I looked at the mask like it was an antique. I told my innocent old friend that he was naive to think I wouldn't notice him standing right next to me just because his coordinates were hidden. So, I was the one being played? Fantastic. Aha sounded ecstatic. As expected of the friend who can see right through my body. Want to guess what else I did? I already knew. Since I didn't want to reveal my identity, he had his masked fool spread rumors about my time on the space station, half-truths mixed with lies. However, I had intercepted the main source of the leak, the internet. The masked fools were good, but their hacking skills couldn't compare to Silver Wolf. She was a digital life form with a natural advantage, and she had been trained by the best. There were very few people in the universe who could challenge her. You still know me so well, the mask sighed. Akivali was right. Once you read someone's life, they might not be the person who knows themselves best anymore. This is too much fun. The voice grew more excited. He asked me if I was sure I intercepted everything. He mentioned a masked fool who had been undercover on Skrullum's planet for a long time and finally stole something from Skrullum himself. He told me I had missed a few leaks. I stayed calm. Skrullum, member 76 of the Genius Society and ruler of planet Skrullum, was one of the few who could actually go toe-to-toe with Silver Wolf in a hacking battle. Goodbye, old friend, Aha laughed. I think I'll go print those chocolate wrappers now. The laughter faded, and the mask lost its glow. I didn't know if he was actually going to mess with Nanook or not. With Aha, you never knew what was a lie and what was the truth. I wasn't a prophet. I couldn't predict his chaos. I put the mask away and called Silver Wolf. I told her to check if any information had leaked through today. Aha didn't call just to joke about Nanook. He called to gloat that he had successfully bypassed my security. I found it. Silver Wolf's voice came through the phone. A few lines leaked. In just half an hour, they went viral. It's too big to scrub clean now. She noted that the information had only just been allowed to reach the space station's network. I told her to get to the point. I asked her what exactly leaked. The Aeon of Life created another Aeon, which drew the attention of the Garden of Recollection, she read out. I knew there would be lies mixed in. I told her to keep going. There's also a series of wedding photos, she asked, her voice sounding confused. When did you two take these? Aha had timed everything perfectly. The news had spread across the galaxy until it was impossible to erase, and only then did he let it break through the barriers to the Herta space station. Even the Stellaron hunters, Herta herself, and Skrullum had only just received the news. Silver Wolf and Herta could see the tiny traces of editing on the photos. They knew the faces had been swapped, but most people didn't have their technical eyes. The internet was exploding. Back on the space station, the researchers were losing their minds. They huddled over their phones, looking at wedding photos of me and Wanmei. One researcher bragged to the others, saying he told Asta the moment he saw us holding hands that we were married. He claimed we only let go because we wanted to keep it a secret. Wait, why are they making it public now? I heard the researchers whispering in the halls. The source doesn't seem to be Wanmei or Bayan's official accounts. Who cares? Another replied, eyes glued to his screen. I'm just here for the drama. They look perfect together. Meanwhile, in Herta's office, the atmosphere was much colder. Herta stared at her monitor as she dialed Skrillum. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. I want to know what you're doing, she snapped. Those fake rumors were leaked through your information channels. Skrillum's mechanical voice came through the speaker, sounding genuinely apologetic. I am deeply sorry. I won't attempt to make excuses. This was indeed a lapse in my security. I will take full responsibility for debunking these rumors. You don't need to apologize to me, Herta countered, crossing her arms. Go apologize to Bayan and Wanmei. It's lucky those wedding photos had editing traces so small they're almost invisible. I don't know if anyone else will even believe they're fake. I will do my best to earn their forgiveness, Skrillum continued. Bayan is one of my few true friends, and Wanmei is an essential academic partner. Herta paused, catching a specific detail. I knew you and Bayan were close, but you talk about him like he's more than just a researcher. He visited planet Skrillum before, the mechanical noble explained. His knowledge is vast. I admire his understanding of life. He is one of the few who truly looks at humans and mechanical life forms as equals. Herta let out a dry laugh. I know. He'd probably look at you and a swarm of insects with the same level of indifference. Precisely. He has used a similar metaphor with me before, Skrillum admitted. Now, if you'll excuse me, I must handle the trouble caused by my negligence. Somewhere else in the galaxy, at the Stellaron Hunter's hideout, Silver Wolf was aggressively tapping on her phone game. She was fuming. Behind her, Kafka watched with a faint, knowing smile. It's just a set of fake photos, Kafka teased. Our genius hacker seems a bit upset. Careful, or you'll crack your screen. First of all, I'm not upset, Silver Wolf muttered, not looking up. Secondly, even if they're fake, those idiots out there will think they're real. Debunking them won't even matter at this point. Kafka leaned back, her voice calm and analytical. Are you interested in Bayan? Are you worried people will think he's taken, making it harder for you to move in? Who said I'm interested in him? Silver Wolf snapped. Don't be so defensive. Listen to me, Kafka said smoothly. This is just a rumor. It doesn't affect your actions, only your reputation after you've finished the job. Silver Wolf's grip on her phone loosened slightly. Reputation? Since when do Stellaron hunters care about that? True, Kafka added. But you know who Bayan really is. It adds a certain spice. I'll say it again. I don't have feelings for him, Silver Wolf insisted. But defeating the top boss in the universe game? Now that sounds interesting. Kafka smiled. Whatever makes you happy. Back on the Astral Express, March 7th was staring at her phone, her jaw dropping. Bayan, how could he do this? Pom-Pom trotted over, ears twitching. What happened, Passenger March? Is Bayan not going to make me donuts anymore? No. March turned her phone around to show the screen. Pom-Pom squinted at the images and huffed indignantly. He got married to that new passenger, Wanmei. According to the customs of certain civilizations, he should be sending us wedding candy and snacks. You only care about your stomach, March complained. Himiko was much calmer. She had just seen a new announcement from a member of the Genius Society. The photos are fakes, March. There are microscopic editing traces. It proves the faces were swapped. Don't get worked up. March froze. Wait, who would be so wicked? The person debunking it. Himiko asked playfully, trying to lighten the mood. No, I mean the person who spread the rumors in the first place. Inside my room on the Express, I checked the remaining leaked messages. Thankfully, nothing definitively proved I was the Aeon of life. Aha was always finding ways to cause me trouble. I decided I'd have to return the favor eventually, but for now, ignoring him was the best revenge. He lived for the reaction, after all. The two biggest rumors were the wedding and the claim that the Aeon of Life had created another Aeon, drawing the gaze of the Garden of Recollection. To the public, I was a nobody, but Ruan-mei was a legend. That's why the scandal was spreading like wildfire. I calmly sipped my tea and looked over at Ruan-mei. Even though Skrillum had already issued a public denial, I felt I should say something. Do you need me to take responsibility for this? Ruan-mei didn't look up from her notebooks. No, she said softly. This was ultimately my oversight. If anyone should take responsibility, it's me. Her face remained as calm as a still lake. Though, if you want to show your responsibility, I'd prefer a more substantial reward than an apology. She finally looked at me. Besides, aren't you worried about the other rumor? The one about the Aeon of Life creating another god. Fully the remembrance has already appeared. If this Son of Life appears too, people will start calling the Aeon of Life the All-Father. Does it matter? I asked indifferently, taking another sip of tea. Is the plum blossom cake ready for my midnight snack yet? Thanks to Aha's meddling, I couldn't even walk back to my office without being swarmed. My phone was vibrating nonstop with messages from researchers. I finally had to turn off notifications and set an automated reply with Skrillum's debunking statement. I was planning to leave the station tomorrow anyway. Hopefully, by the time I returned, the gossip would have died down. Just then, another friend reached out. I placed my phone on the desk and projected the call. Skrillum's mechanical figure appeared in the air. Long time no see, friend, his voice echoed. I am incredibly sorry. My negligence has caused you and Ruan-mei a great deal of trouble. Don't blame yourself, I said calmly. These people were looking for trouble. Even you couldn't have predicted that the masked fools were working under Aha's direct orders. I leaned back. You were just a tool in their game. I'd rather point my spear at the one who actually pulled the trigger. I appreciate your grace, Skrillum replied. I chuckled. If I'm not mistaken, you're about to call Ruan-mei to apologize to her next, right? Your ability to read others remains as sharp as ever, Skrillum praised. As he was about to hang up to dial her, I turned my head toward Ruan-mei, who was still buried in her notes. Ruan-mei, Skrillum is looking for you. She finally looked up. She knew that if she didn't show her face now, Skrillum would just keep trying to reach her, wasting even more time. I tilted the phone toward her so the camera could catch her. She looked at the mechanical gentleman in the projection and gave a simple, polite nod. I shared the same perspective as Bai Yin. Skrillum apologized again for the rumors, and I responded with a calm nod. I appreciated his grace and told him I'd handle the aftermath on my end. I hadn't turned the phone away from Ruan-mei yet. I looked at the projection and smiled. Aren't you curious why Ruan-mei and I are in the same room? I asked. That is a private matter between you and Lady Ruan-mei, Skrillum replied smoothly. It is not something for an apologizer to question. I decided to offer a brief explanation anyway. Herta knows about it. Ruan-mei and I are collaborating on a project. She might not be able to head to the space station to meet you in person right away. Sorry for kidnapping your academic partner. Skrillum was bound to find out eventually, so I figured I'd save him the trouble of guessing. Even though the screen was pointed at Ruan-mei, he kept his focus on me as he responded. That won't be an issue. Most matters regarding the simulated universe don't require face-to-face meetings. Ruan-mei is an excellent partner. I wish you both a successful collaboration. We chatted for a few more minutes. I invited him to visit the station again soon, then let him go so he could deal with the PR mess. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the debunking articles he had posted. He used his personal information channels, but not his official account. People who respected the Genius Society believed him immediately. The rest of the internet was a different story. I spotted several masked fools in the comments immediately. They were stirring up trouble, calling Skrillum Uncle Leg, and claiming the debunking was fake. They pointed out editing marks on the photos. Of course there were edits. Who doesn't touch up wedding photos? I'm so sad. I'll believe whatever you say. One comment read. When are Yaosher and Lan getting married then? Another mocked. Are you just a bitter robot who can't stand seeing people happy? I looked at the aggressive comments and felt a twinge of guilt. Skrillum was taking the heat for me. But really, the only person who should have been apologizing was Aha. Only the Aeon of Elation could make these fools this united. They followed the scent of a big joke, like sharks to blood. I made a mental note to keep an eye on these masked fools. I was honestly curious to see how they'd react if I ever gave them a literal kick in the teeth. It would be a fun experiment to observe. Ruan Mei remained focused on her notes, lost in a sea of knowledge. I didn't disturb her. Instead, I messaged Silver Wolf. She had shared the post about Ruan Mei's wedding along with the photos. Silver Wolf, care to explain? I sent. Silver Yu is very distressed that you're looking for a stepmother for him. She replied instantly. What is there to explain? It's fake. You can't tell. I typed back. Suddenly, a third avatar popped into our private chat. It was Silver Yu. I'm not. I didn't say that. Then he sent another message. Actually, if I did say it, I meant I don't mind having more stepmoms. More people means it's easier to find a gaming group. I could practically feel Silver Wolf's embarrassment through the screen. I have some family issues to deal with, she messaged. Talk later. I'm going to give that kid a buff on his head, she added. I wished Silver Yu luck. He probably wouldn't be undermining her again anytime soon. After dealing with a mountain of other messages, I left the room and headed to the Astral Express parlor car. Dan Hung was still organizing the databank with Welt's help. Stell was busy taking on every commission she could find on the station. Pom Pom was in the kitchen. Only Himiko and March 7th were in the lounge. Himiko was tinkering with her coffee, but March wasn't playing with her camera like usual. She was staring at her phone, looking absolutely fuming. I walked over. What's wrong? Who upset the most beautiful girl on the express? Himiko didn't look up from her brew. I told her there's no point in getting angry at those people. She's just being stubborn. March held up her phone. The rumors were debunked. Why don't these people believe it? They even laughed at me when I tried to explain. I looked at her with a complicated expression. My dear March, I'm glad you want to stand up for me. But remember one thing. Never try to reason with a masked fool. I warned you, Himiko added. It won't do any good. It'll just leave you frustrated. Exactly, I said, finishing the thought. You shouldn't talk to them. You should just rip off their masks and kick them in the ass. Himiko paused, looking at me with surprise. The first half of my sentence was fine, but the second half went off the rails. March put her phone down, still pouting. Do you have a grudge against them? Why are they so obsessed with you? I took a cup of coffee from Himiko and turned to March. When the masked fools target you, don't ask if you have a grudge with them. Ask yourself why they find you interesting. Himiko handed a cup to March. He's right. Their criteria for a target is always about entertainment, not logic. I took a sip of the coffee. It was decent. After all, the masked fools follow elation, not the hunt. Though, I suppose there might be some fool out there named Hunter of Elation. March looked confused, but Himiko understood the joke. She sighed. Please don't make jokes using two factions and Ruan Mei's name at the same time. Your talent for offending people is top tier. Don't teach that kind of humor to Stell. March looked back and forth between us, still lost. She didn't know that Ruan and Mei were the surnames of Ruan Mei's parents, and that she combined them because she viewed them as equals in the composition of life. Without that bit of trivia, the joke went right over her head. I didn't bother explaining. I just smiled at Himiko. Stell has a good sense of humor. She's a natural. Himiko poured herself a cup of coffee and sat down on the sofa. She frowned slightly, her eyes reflecting a bit of concern. Stella's a good kid, she said softly. But I heard she's been secretly rummaging through every single trash can on the space station lately. March 7th had just recovered from my earlier joke. She didn't quite get the punchline, but the mention of trash cans brought her right back into the conversation. She was eager to vent. It's all because of that one time. March complained. She found some piece of junk in a trash can, and then Herta paid a fortune to get it back. Ever since Herta bought it, Stell thinks every trash can is a hidden treasure chest. She sees it as a free lottery ticket. I realized something was wrong. Himiko had been listening to March grumble about this for 2 days now, so she was used to it. March leaned forward, throwing her hands up. Why would anyone throw something that valuable away anyway? Whoever tossed it is the real culprit. They're the one who turned Stell into a trash-obsessed weirdo. Wait, my mind started racing. I originally thought the trash incident was just a fluke, that Peppy the dog had jumped in, and Stell only found the item while helping him out. I figured she found the drop of Nanook's blood by accident. Herta bought it, and then Herta simply concluded that Stell had a natural, biological urge to dig through garbage. But March's description didn't fit that theory. I looked at March, my expression serious. When exactly did she find that item Herta bought? March thought for a second. Well, Peppy jumped into the trash can, and then this golden thing literally dragged Peppy back out. That's what Stell told me. And that was the exact moment her obsession started. I went silent. As the Aeon of life, I felt a sudden weight of guilt. Kafka might have messed with Stell's memory modules, but her new habit of diving into dumpsters? That was entirely my fault. I was the one who left that golden life form behind. I need to step out for a moment, I said. I set my coffee down on the side table and walked briskly into the next carriage. I pulled out my phone and had Silver Moon connect me to an anonymous chat interface. Kafka, I typed. There's something I need to tell you. I'm sorry. The reply came back almost instantly. If this is about those fake photos, don't apologize. In any case, it wasn't necessary. I'm a bit busy right now. Can we talk later? Something happened to Stell, I replied. The status changed immediately. What happened to the child? I thought you were busy, I shot back. Let's talk later. I can be less busy, she replied. That child is important to both of us, isn't she? Tell me what happened. Actually, no. I think you should stay busy, I typed. I had Silver Moon cut the connection immediately. Then, I told the AI to block all incoming messages from the Stellaron hunters for a while. Kafka wasn't going to be reaching me anytime soon. I pocketed my phone and walked back into the parlor car. March looked up at me, confused. We were just talking. Where did you disappear to? I picked up my coffee and took a sip. Nowhere. I just had to annoy someone with a bad attitude. Who? Do I know them? You will eventually, I said. I spent some time chatting with Himiko and the others. Even though the scenery outside the window didn't change, time slipped away quickly. Eventually, I retreated to my private room. It had been a while since CU, the aeon of memory I helped create, was born. Just as I expected, CU's existence wasn't quiet. At first, it was just scattered rumors on the web. But as more civilizations felt CU's influence, the internet exploded with news. Even the rumors about me and Ruan Mei were being pushed down by the sheer scale of the new revelations. I scrolled through the headlines. Thousands of people missing in desolate lands for years had been led back to civilization by a white flame. Civilizations under attack by the Antimatter Legion were being watched over by an unknown god. Warriors clad in white flame armor were striking back, even chasing the Legion into deep space. One report caught my eye. A general of the Antimatter Legion, a ravager who had destroyed entire star systems, had been split in half by a sudden burst of sword chi and incinerated by white flames. People first thought the preservation had stepped in, but they soon realized this power was different. It didn't just protect, it ignited courage. It didn't use a shield to hold the line. It used a sword to carve out a future. People were already naming this figure in their hearts. A new Aeon had appeared. The academic world was in an uproar. They linked it back to the rumors from Herta Space Station that the Aeon of Life had created another Aeon. I sat in my room, eating the plum blossom cakes Ruan Mei had given me. She had let me have her portion after I finished mine. I knew the space station wouldn't be quiet for long. Scholars and members of the Garden of Recollection would be swarming the place soon to study the mystery of the new Aeon. I didn't block the news about the memory Aeon on the station's internal network. I wanted the staff to have something to talk about. It would help them move on from the trauma of the recent Legion invasion. I checked the group chat for the station employees. It was chaos. Did you see the news? One researcher wrote. A new Aeon actually appeared. Life created another Aeon, and it brought back memory, another added. We actually saw it happen. I decided to stir the pot. Using my new nickname, I jumped into the chat. Where is this Life guy anyway? He's not even on the station. And where are my plum blossom cakes? I closed the app, smiling. The distraction was working. People were talking less about the clash between the Eons and more about the miracle itself. Every time they mentioned the fight, they praised me until my ears felt like they were growing calluses. I didn't think I deserved it. I was just doing what I could while chasing my own goals. I put the phone down and opened a file I had traded for earlier. It was Herta's childhood data. But this wasn't the sanitized version she usually gave out. This was the real deal. I traded some top-tier intel for this file about 10 days ago. Herta wanted my data on that first clash with Nanook, and in exchange, she gave me her childhood records. I flipped through the pages with genuine interest. I started piecing together her physiological state back then, curious about how a genius like her functioned as a child. I wanted to see what made her life force so unique compared to the masses. While I read, Ruanmei sat nearby, her fingers grazing the final pages of her notebook. Time slowed down in that quiet room. But outside, the rest of the universe was screaming. Online and offline, information about me was spreading like a wildfire that wouldn't go out. The news was being driven by the survivors. These were the people guided back to civilization by my white flames after being lost in the cosmic wilderness. Most of them had been in desperate situations, and they saw my intervention as a blessing of hope. Some were still on their way back, following the trail of white fire, but the ones who had already returned were restless. They didn't just sit around. They were picking up weapons and preparing to head back out to rescue others trapped in the wastes. They wanted to pass on the spark. They were the ones who first gave a name to this new power, hope. People reading the news realized the story had been updated. It wasn't just some nameless god who saved them. It was the Aeon of Hope. Some of these survivors became even more formidable. They donned armor forged from crimson and white flames, stepping into the sea of stars with dreams of love and peace. They brought courage to those in despair, lighting the way forward. This new organization was rising like a morning sun, ending the long night. Following in the footsteps of the Galaxy Rangers, a new group was born under the blessing of hope. Meanwhile, the people of the Xianzhou who had been rescued started guessing what official title the authorities would give this new Aeon. But another piece of news was bubbling up alongside it. Rumors were swirling that the Aeon of Hope had actually appeared on the space station right after the Aeon of Life created her. Most people didn't believe it. The followers of Hope thought it was an insult to their god, suggesting she was just a creation. But because of what I had done 7 days ago, they didn't dare speak ill of the Aeon of Life. The strangest part was my own followers. Everyone expected the life worshippers to be aggressive and protective, but they were the most rational people in the chat. They calmly traced the source of the rumors and asked everyone to discuss things logically. Their calmness only made the doubters angrier. Of course, the masked fools were in the middle of it all, throwing gasoline on the fire. They wanted a riot. It wasn't just a dispute between hope and life anymore. It was a festival for the followers of Aha. I had no intention of stepping in. I didn't care if my relationship with Siyu, the new Aeon of Hope, was public or not. But Siyu cared. As the Aeon of Hope, she was practicing her path, and as a daughter, she hated seeing the people she rescued fighting with her father's followers. She sent a telepathic message to me first, asking for permission to handle it. I told her to do whatever she wanted. Suddenly, her voice, firm yet gentle, echoed in the minds of all her followers. She didn't hide anything. She openly admitted our relationship. The farce ended instantly. A conflict orchestrated by the Aeon of Elation was shut down by the Aeons themselves. I sent a quick message to my own followers too. I told them to go do something meaningful instead of providing free entertainment for the masked fools. The fools kept shouting for a while before they realized the battlefield was empty. They were just screaming at each other. With the dust settled, my title as the father of a god was set in stone. People began to connect the dots. 7 days ago, the Aeon of Life heavily wounded destruction, saved multiple civilizations, and brought the lost home. It was a miracle. Destruction had arrived, yet no one died. Now, life had ignited the flame of hope for the entire universe. People finally understood why the civilizations that followed life respected their father god so deeply. They realized that if it wasn't for this public argument, I probably would have never claimed credit. I would have let the truth stay buried. They couldn't figure out who leaked the news first, but those who recognized the masked fool's involvement thought of Aha. Aha loves to pull the strings of the universe from the shadows. He can turn a tiny ripple into a tsunami just for a laugh. I knew exactly what he was up to. He wanted everyone to know I was the father of hope, but he also wanted them to know that hope was built on a foundation of destruction. He's waiting for the moment hope and destruction finally collide. That's the grand joke he's setting up, a spectacle of cosmic proportions. Siyu's honesty actually played right into one of Aha's goals, but I didn't mind. In fact, I was becoming more interested in how Aha would react to getting kicked in the ass. If seeing two Ians clash is a joke, then watching the Aeon of Elation get humbled by the Aeon of Life is an even better one. It would make the whole universe laugh. I looked through a bit more of Herta's data, scanned the news one last time, and turned off my phone. I'm being too kind to Aha. I sighed. I'm actually going to grant his wish to get kicked. May finished her notes and looked at me. If anyone else had said that, she would have thought they were insane. But she knew me. She knew I wasn't joking, and she knew exactly what I planned to do the next time I saw him.